picture going. Let's see if we got audio.
Hello, hello, hello.
Alright, we got picture going. Let's see if we got
Wow.
audio.
Hello, hello.
Alright, we're good.
Alrighty. Hold on. Keep it going out. Signal. There it is. Okay, I got help, so I plug it in. All right, here we go. From the industrial wastelands of Michigan to the fruited plains of Iowa, this is the American Green.
Why would they do it cheerful messages?
You are the dead. Remain exactly where you are. Make no move until you are ordered.
We burn them to ashes and then burn the ashes. That's our official motto.
Now we can see you. Clasp your hands behind your heads. Stand out in the middle of the room. Stand back to back.
Who can explain the fascination of fire? What draws us to it, whether we're young or old?
Here comes the candles will light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head.
And welcome to the American Greed Factory podcast. Nathan,
This is Common.
Andrew?
tonight we have some exciting stuff to talk about. Interesting, exciting novel, comic book, some more wrestling, and whatever else suits our fancy.
Like dog weddings.
Yeah, dog weddings. That's a real thing?
Yes. No,
Oh.
you haven't seen.
Probably.
I mean, it crops up every now and then where somebody has like photos and a story of like this cute dog wedding where. and
You
it
haven't
was,
seen the
like,
reality show North Carolina Dog Wives?
Yeah.
Tearing each other's heads up, their hair out, fighting and yelling, and then the story gets deeper as one lady falls in love with a German Shepherd. Satisfy me like my husband never could.
With lots of
North Carolina dog wedding. It's got a picture of handcuffs instead of a
It
wedding.
should just be Dog the Bounty Hunter marrying people. Like dog wedding.
So, yeah, let's see. Strike's still going on.
Yeah, which I was surprised by because I
Indeed.
didn't even think about it until I saw it. The thing about it this week, I'm like, oh fuck, that's still going on.
Oh yeah, it's everyone's kind of like, oh fuck, that's still going on. I think even the people that are doing it are just kind of.
Wait, what
surprised.
am I doing? Oh, right.
Yeah, it's but you know, thankfully on the internet and when people talk about it, everyone's really supportive and helpful, and they always have something positive to say. You know, no one wants to
And really make sure they got their facts right and don't
Yeah,
say anything
get the facts
disparaging.
right. And because everyone's really knowledgeable about like my job. Like the whole country everyone seems to want to weigh in on the joy of building cars, and the trials and tribulations of it. And everyone's been supportive. It's been good. I haven't been disappointed at the things people have said, so that's good.
I mean, I'm just gonna guess on how AutoPlant runs. You have your SUV line, your van line, then your Coke line, and then you do a little bit of the Coke line, and then you do go back to all these other lines. So you
Yeah, I mean, we make $80 an hour. We sit around and drink beer, play cards. The companies are completely bankrupt. I mean, they only made like $50 billion in the last 4 years.
And then you have a whip to control each of your 5 illegal Mexicans inside the plant to make the cars for you.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's like when I go to work, it's like when the guys in The Sopranos would go to like that sub shop in the beginning. You know, that's really what it is. It's just a bunch of guys sitting around, a bunch of fat guys in bowling shirts with their feet up. So yeah, and I'm glad the public, supports that because everyone seems to know a lot about it. Because you see, I don't know, no one else's job ever gets published on the internet, like what they do and what they make, and so it's always kind of interesting. Come, auto contract time, how everyone wants to seriously weigh in. So, but it's like everything else. It's hard work, but someone's got to do it. We'll see what happens there. It's been weird. I mean, it hasn't, thus far it hasn't affected us at Ford or the people at Chrysler. But, a lot of people are angry that we're not on strike too. Had to field those questions. It's like, well, that's not how it works anymore. They don't let, we agreed not to do that, and there's important reasons why. And one of the big ones is They don't want the government doesn't want 30 million people out of work in a beat or something because of all the subsidiary suppliers and truck drivers and everyone else. Because then that brings a lot of pressure to settle the contract from the government. And I don't think we want this government pressure on the union to solve the contract. Because somehow I don't get the feeling it'd work out in our favor.
I'm gonna guess Trump would just say to kill half of you because you're treason, and then the other
You should
half-
build the wall.
Something would happen along those lines.
half of you are gonna go wrangle all the alligators, put in the moat.
No. And the impeachment thing is getting wider and weirder all the time, as predicted. We knew this was going to go nowhere fast, so. I mean, it wasn't going to, like, be intelligent or adult, so.
Well, what about
Yeah.
what about Trump as an intelligent or adult?
Nothing, well,
I mean, the investigation's uncovering exactly what he does all the time, which is act like an asshole. So I don't see why you're surprised.
oh, I'm not. I'm just, no, it's just a weird time to be alive. It's a weird country right now. But it's always been one.
Oh yeah, I found some weird. Have you guys heard about the Great Boogaloo?
No.
Okay, well, good. That means you're not associating with fucking weird people.
Yeah. I mean, I am associating with weird people, just not online.
So essentially, I've sussed this out of all my YouTube gun channels, and the Great Boogaloo is essentially, it's like code for like American Civil War II Electric Boogaloo. And
Okay. Oh,
so this is basically for like libertarians and gun nuts and preppers and all those people.
Yeah.
Like,
well, the call's going out.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's all posed as like, ha, this is a joke, but like you just know, like when it's not a joke, like that's just the sheen of jokes, like so everybody can get involved. But they've actually fucking believed this stuff. Like they're gonna take my gun, American Civil War II, Electric Boogaloo.
I have not heard this. Okay. Ugh. Yeah, that's that was an yeah somebody. Yeah, well, who's
But
somebody?
yeah, they just call it the Great Boogaloo to be fucking cute about it.
Yeah.
Because like there was a gun channel that had like their essentially their apocalypse, like gun list, like what pistol or rifle or combo you're gonna carry into the apocalypse, and like one of those was like the Boogaloo apocalypse gun list or
Oh, okay.
whatever.
Well, I'm glad everyone's doing something productive.
I mean, not that you shouldn't care about, I guess, the quality of your firearms if you're really that into it, but at the same time, doesn't it just come down to the ability and the training of the person using said weapons more than the actual weapon you're using? I mean,
Yeah.
you don't want to use a matchlock rifle to go up against an AK-47, but at the same time, if the guy with the AK-47 has no idea how to fucking use it, and the guy with the matchlock's a sniper with it, doesn't it kind of equal out a little bit?
Wait, what brought this up?
Well, no, I'm just talking about like the whole gun culture of like everybody showing off, like, oh yeah,
Oh,
I got
yeah.
this gun and this gun.
Well,
but they
I mean,
have no
there's
idea how to fucking use it.
I mean, like I was especially this way too. Like like from playing video games,
Yeah.
like you kind of assume a profile is like, oh, that gun is awesome, and then you just watched it on Forgotten Weapons, like, oh, I guess it's a really expensive piece of shit with some interesting features.
Well, it's all fun and games till the toilet stop flushing, kids. And all the gunfire in the world is not going to stop you from getting intestinal parasites. So,
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they have their own water maker and electrical grid. They're just gonna create their own country. And
they're going to ride it out. They have extensive.
I don't know how like crazy it gets, but like I just like it infiltrated multiple YouTube gun channels. I'm like, oh fuck, what is this shit? Because that's basically like that's the way I get like, dip my toe into like the conservative waters of like what, like conservative middle America is thinking about stuff, and it's like, oh, they're thinking about stupid bullshit. Okay,
Yeah, really, these people aren't insightful. I'm surprised at that.
I don't know, because I was like, I don't know, I was also that thing with the, you know, Beto O'Rourke seemed like a really great vice president, like would-be vice president, and then he gets out there and says like, "Yeah, I'm gonna take your AR-15s," and like a crowd cheers, like, "Oh fuck!" And it's
Well,
all
that's
like,
some crap.
and it's not like it, you know, it's not like can't take my gun and stuff like that. Like, no, there's, you know, various things, sensible gun control and stuff like that, but like this wave of like, yeah, let's take the guns down, and like I just know there's so many people who like might not be conservative who like that's it now that's totally not a vote going that way just because of this one thing.
Yeah, yeah, they've kind of changed to, might have changed their ideas a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. That's
I mean, I get he's trying to ride a hot topic issue and trying to make himself stand out from the crowd because everybody else.
Yeah, because they, you know, no one's touching that third rail, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll put my dick on this third rail."
Because I mean, because there was a YouTube video I was watching about Beto O'Rourke because he had a campaign speech in a church somewhere in Texas, and he was talking about taking away people's AR-15s. And there's a couple of people that stood up and legitimately asked him, "It's like, well, what do you want to do then about the government overstepping its power and the people taking that power back? How is that going to happen?" And he was like, "Well, how are you going to fight a military with aircraft carriers and all this other shit with an AR-15?" He's like, "You're just going to get nuked into the ground or whatever." And it was like, well, yeah, but at the same time, that's a check. That's a check that's in the Constitution. It's not just there because somebody was like, "I don't want people to take my guns away from me, so we're just going to put this in here."
there's kind of this left-wing fallacy because people don't read like really grim stuff. I like to read grim stuff. That like all the right-wingers in America are fat diabetics bound to hover rounds, and that when they call for their revolt, they're all going to stand in a circle and wait for Hellfire missiles to rain down on them. And then the people on the coast are going to throw a big party, like, yay! No, they're not going to. It's not going to be a bunch of people getting together with rifles and shooting each other in a field in Pennsylvania. That's not how it's going to go down. What it's going to go down as is it'll start with the right-wingers, and it'll be something like the Troubles in Northern Ireland, where there'll just be bombings and attacks everywhere, and the people fade back into the woodwork. And then all the other people that aren't part of that, but are completely disaffected by this completely corrupt political system that does nothing for them, well, they'll start to see that stuff, and they'll do the same thing. And then before you know it, you'll have, you know, churches being shot up in Omaha and somebody blowing up gas mains in New York City, but they're all not going to be in the same group. They're all going to be different little groups, and the whole country's just fucked. So this whole thing where everyone's going to gather up in a desert in Nevada and say we're against the government and wait to be annihilated is it's not how it happens. It's all going to be low intensity conflict. Organized armies can never win that war. They definitely can't win it against their own population. But the point is, we could skip all that by not being fucking stupid. Because I don't really want that to happen, because nothing better is going to come out of that. It's going to be something a lot worse. Because then in the long term, 15, 20 years of that, how's the American government going to deal with that? Well, you know, they're going to become a police state, and then everyone will be on side against the government, and then it's just a race to the nukes.
Well, that's the thing, though. That's why I liked what you touched on, where it's like everybody always repeats the phrase that history, you know, repeats itself, and it teaches you a lesson that you shouldn't repeat, or you should look for patterns. And it's like, how many wars have we fucking been in that have gone on for more than a decade now in one geographical area and throughout history in wars where it's like, it's proven that a standing army does jack shit, nothing against an insurgency that's buried and, like you said, can just fade back into the woodwork and then pop out and do damage when it feels like it. That stuff doesn't go away overnight, and it doesn't just happen like, oh yeah, like you said, they're not just going to gather one area for you to tactically dupe them and the problem will be over.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know why people just act like it's like, oh yeah, it's got to be a stand-up fight. It's got to be fair. Like, no, war has never been that way. It's always catered to the people that want to break the rules and want to fight dirty. It's never been a fair fight. So.
Yeah, but I mean, the bottom line, though, is if people feel like they are doing well and have a sense of purpose, I mean, you're always going to have those fringe crazies that do shit.
Yeah.
But, you know, if if the economy works for most people are not going to dedicate their life to right-wing insurgent terrorism. They're going to just live a happy life like people want to. But if you just drive people out to the margins and then threaten them when their back's already against the wall, it's like, well, that's a dumb idea. They're not going to just capitulate like, oh, you're right, I'm sorry. No, that's not how it works. And but that, you know, that's not what gets you clicks and views and all the other metrics that these politicians use to show that their message is getting out. Because somebody told him that that's like, yeah, go with this. This is going to be what works. You know, and amongst the echo chamber that, you know, his political campaign, I'm sure, operates in, it's like, yeah, that'd be a great message. Get that out there. People will respect that. And it's like, oh, okay, you're totally disconnected. And they're from fucking Texas.
Yeah.
From Texas. So it's like,
Well, to be fair,
That's why I said he'd be a great vice president, because usually like, if a
yeah, Lyndon Johnson.
yeah, but like if anytime a liberal president is elected, it's either they're from the South or their vice president is a large political candidate from the South.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because a weird exception to that was like Obama Biden.
Yeah.
Like they were both. I mean, he was from Delaware, so what's that? That's like the East. And then Obama was from Chicago, so that was the Midwest. But he was wildly popular on the coast and knew he wouldn't win the South. So he's no guy named Barack Obama is going to take Alabama. Sorry, not going to happen. And he even made jokes about that. So, but yeah, that was. Because then we had Trump Pence. Now Trump's a New York guy and Pence is from Indiana, but he was also the 17th guy or something on the list. Like they called other people and they're like, no, I think I'm good. I think I'm going to sit this one out.
Who was Hillary's VP pick again?
Tim Kaine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's New York and he was like Midwest as well again.
Wasn't it like Kentucky or something?
No, I think he was a little more eastern Midwest, like maybe Pennsylvania or one of those Maryland or something like that. He was, don't know much about him. I know he spoke fluent Spanish because like half his speeches down south would be in Spanish, which was kind of weird.
Because that's the people, like you said, they're gonna vote for somebody. Not gonna vote for somebody named Barack Obama. They're not gonna vote for somebody that speaks Spanish either. So. I mean, good
Now,
on
I guess
him.
there are some people. Like, I always thought it's cool to have a president that can like go to other countries and like, oh, he can address them in their language. That's unique because usually everyone comes to us and speaks English, and it's like, oh, this guy's talking to them in their own. But I guess if you're just some racist, it's like, he's speaking the devil's tongue, speaking that serpent language. Because the guys down at our favorite Mexican restaurant always try to school us in on Spanish. I totally mangle it because we always get the same thing. So they try to tell me how to say it in Spanish, and I just can't. I just like, oh, did I do it right? And he's just like, no. I was like, sorry.
You should follow Conlon's theory of, or not theory, but actual practice of just full immersion. If you don't order it right, you don't get what you ordered. You get whatever it sounded like. Then you have to suffer through it until you get it.
Give me the quesadilla with the jalapeno poppers.
Yeah.
They just give you French fries and tater tots.
This one wants a hillbilly meal. Put gravy on top of the hash browns and like a sparkler in it.
Yay!
I mean, I know Mexican restaurants have like American food on there, mostly for kids or for people that just can't stomach the food and they're kind of there to begin with. But I always feel like it's kind of just like a half-ass, like, just take it off the menu. It's like, you came into a Mexican restaurant, you didn't come here to eat French fries and chicken fingers.
Well, some
Like,
people bring their kids though.
No,
Like,
I know.
That's
I mean,
like the Facebook meme I get like constantly is like, my kids are so well cultured. They eat so many different. They eat chicken fingers at the Mediterranean restaurant, and chicken fingers at the Mexican restaurant, chicken fingers at the Chinese restaurant.
Well, here they have the Chinese restaurants around here because there's a lot of Chinese people that live here. Now they ask you, like, do you want an American menu or a Chinese menu? And I just looked at the guy and said, well, I want Chinese food. And he's like, yeah, but do you want the American Chinese food or do you want the real Chinese food? It's like, well, what's the real Chinese food like? I said, don't be cutting up raw eels and stuff. No, nothing raw. That's against the health code. But they, basically if you order like a Chinese meal, like you don't know, there's no like equivalent to this, but it's a lot of pork and noodles, but they put it out like on a tray that you rotate around, and everyone gets a little bit of something, and it's like that's how the Chinese do it, and they give you chopsticks too, which I never could quite master. Kind of work them like a shovel, but the grabbing part, like I almost get it, and then one of them will slip.
I can do anything. It's always like rice. It's like, ah, fuck, you're just tilting the bowl and just like shoving it towards your mouth.
Yeah, and even they do that.
Yeah,
So it's not a bad technique.
Yeah, but around here, that's unique, though. Do you want the Chinese menu or the American menu? It's like, I just want the egg foo young.
Did you know like the anti-MSG thing is like all bullshit?
Yeah, I know that.
Okay. I've been watching a lot of cooking stuff, and they've been talking about. I was like, oh no, some racist guy wrote an article from Stanford because he ate some Chinese food and got a headache. So then that's where like all this anti-MSG stuff came around.
They put it on the table here if you ask for it.
Yeah, so
Like salt, it says MSG, but it only takes. I only did it a few times. It takes a very small amount.
yeah,
Yeah, it makes it very, very good.
if you go to
It's
Red
right.
Ginger here on the other side, they have shakers of MSG on the table too.
Yeah,
It's actually pretty good shit.
Yeah. You gotta ask for it. It dehydrates the shit out of you, though.
Yeah, it's super salty, but
You got to drink like a cup of water. Because I don't think it's not illegal here. Illegal? Anymore,
no,
right?
no.
Yeah, 'cause
Like you can just order. Like no, I saw some binging with Babish. Yeah, that's right. Okay. For some reason that sounded raw. It was like that's not a drinking show, is it? Okay.
binge drinking.
With
channel.
Babish. Let's start up our
I'm
Leach
pretty sure
YouTube
that channel
video.
will not make any money whatsoever.
We'll just leech viewers from binging with Babish, like, because like, is this the same thing? Like, no, it isn't. We just get a bunch of like false views, and we'll monetize it and pretend to be drunk the whole time. Or go method and just get drunk.
Method.
Full method.
But yeah, you can just order it from like Amazon, and it's like a syrup of MSG. It's just like a bottle of it, and you can use it in cooking and all that stuff.
What's the difference between the syrup and like the powder? Is it different potency?
That's probably just how it picks up in the food. Or maybe it has something to do with like delivery or something like that. But yeah, it was just like a clear liquid of just really salty.
I feel like I'm talking about drugs right now. What's the difference between cocaine and heroin? Like,
Well,
Well, one will make you sleep, and the other one will make you clean your room.
one makes you very good at music.
Well, both of them make you good at music,
Well,
but
if-
one will end your career quicker.
I feel like the heroin-soaked musicians, I get their vibe more than the coke-fueled like
Yeah.
metal. Like I like the heroin guys more.
Yeah, there's more. Yeah. Coke's probably more ministry, and
Yeah.
and heroin's more like Led
Nirvana.
Zeppelin and yeah. Nirvana.
Lou Reed. He's just totally stoned on heroin, isn't he? Yep. Take a walk on the wilds.
And Beatles, yeah, Beatles.
What did were the Beatles? Their biggest thing was psychedelic stuff, wasn't that? I mean, I'm sure they did a little bit of everything, but
Yeah.
not what their songs were based on was hallucinogen.
Well, wasn't Maxwell Silver Hammer? Wasn't that all about heroin?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
they just were they into heroin, or they just like write a song about heroin because like in their world just heroin's a big thing.
Yeah, I never got the vibe they were regular heroin guys. I always thought they were like deep, like let's think about something and then write a song about it while we're totally fried, and then put it to orchestrate it or something. And,
I'm pretty sure the only
I
drug,
think they wrote songs about heroin, but I don't know if they were regular imbibers.
I mean, the
I
only
don't know.
drug,
The guy from the Rolling Stones swears by it. Do a little bit every day.
I thought the only drug they didn't really try was like meth. Otherwise, they did every other drug.
Well, it probably wasn't available in large quantities
Yeah.
then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they did everything.
It wasn't in vogue at the time.
Yeah, meth's always been just truckers.
I mean, because anybody can huff paint out of a paper bag. I don't think they did that.
What do you think Yellow Submarine was about?
Toluene Sunrise. Oh man, that just makes my skin crawl. Stuff glue or paint or whatever.
There's a, I mean, I think it's been done in a lot of movies, but there's a movie called, I believe it's called The Wraith. It's that Charlie Sheen revenge car movie.
Yeah.
And there's like one of the guys just a druggies, and he just constantly has like paint over his like mouth and nose because he's just constantly huffing whatever from a bag. And it's hilarious and sad at the same time.
Is that where that character from like Eastbound and Down, like he always is huffing paint and always has like silver fucking spray paint on his fucking mouth and nose and shit
Probably, yeah.
during one of the seasons?
That sounds like Eastbound and Down humor.
Have you guys watched their new show?
Oh,
The one where like the
Gemstones.
preachers? Yeah.
Yeah, I watched the first 3 episodes of it. I forgot about the last couple ones that aired, but
Cause I don't, I didn't get into Vice Principals, and I like that seemed like a really good cast. I didn't want to get into that one either. I didn't really care.
I watched like the first season of Vice Principal. I thought that was pretty good, but I forgot about it. I haven't watched it since.
Well, I don't know. I was kind of burned on like I really like the second to last season of Eastbound and Down, and to me that's where the series ends, where he fakes his death. It's like that's the end of the series. And then they came back with another season and it sucked, and that was the last season. And then they did Vice Principals, so I don't know, I haven't really into their stuff as of late. So
I really came to respect Will Ferrell in Eastbound and Down. Let the child watch. It's like, what the fuck? Are they improvising this?
I probably
Yeah.
I didn't even know that Danny McBride like directed the last Halloween movie.
He did.
Yeah, I thought it was garbage, but he actually directed that.
I thought he produced it and wrote the script. I don't know. He directed it.
Yeah, I know he's been attached to like some scripts where it's like, oh, he wrote that, but I don't know. Cause was he just in? Cause wasn't something with the Aliens Requiem movie where like he wasn't just in it, he was also like a co-writer or something on it. I can't remember.
That could be. I know he was in it, but I don't know the rest of it. Because his buddy was in it for a few minutes. Franco.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I only saw the clip for that movie because I never followed through watching it because I was like, this will just be disappointing, and so I didn't watch it.
It sort of was.
Oh, I thought you liked it, or at least in principle.
Well, okay, we had Prometheus is where we were coming from.
Yeah.
So when we launched into Covenant, I was like, okay. But it's still the same, like, I don't know. The thing with Ridley Scott is his themes sometimes are great, but sometimes they're repetitive. And it's like, how many times are we going to revisit, which one was it? Because that's all based on Paradise Lost.
Oh.
Like how much is Milton? Are we going to run around and quote Milton while we're doing horrible shit? And, the twist ending wasn't a twist. I knew that. Yeah, okay, the other one with a bad. Yeah.
I thought the short films that they released a lot of to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Alien was way better than the fucking last couple Alien movies.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job with those. Some of those I watched them all, and it's like, wow, they captured the spirit of it very good.
Yeah, so I kind of wonder where they're gonna go with that. If they're gonna like see some of that potential and maybe capitalize on it, or if they're just
Well,
gonna...
Disney's got it now, so.
Oh, that's right.
God damn it.
Yeah, they'll probably reboot it, I guess.
Yep.
I forgot about that, and that pisses me off so much because Disney owns like everything that has any potential to be anything now. It seems like.
Well, I believe they had like a Neil Blomkamp, like on an Alien sort of like in betweener movie that seemed really interesting, but then they like, we're not doing that. It costs too much or something, like with every other Neil Blomkamp project.
It's like, wow, this sounds.
We're all in. Oh, it's gonna be rated R and cost $200 million. Never mind.
Well, fucking, did anybody read about what Jonah Hill wants for being in the next Batman movie and shit?
Oh.
Like, he wants double what Robert Pattinson's being paid, so he wants $10 million to either be the Riddler or Penguin, because they haven't decided what that might be the other sticking point.
I mean, Jonah Hill's a bigger draw than Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, I know. That's what I thought too. But at the same time, I'm like,
And
if Robert Pattinson's only getting $5 million, he's getting $10 million, and then whatever the cast rounds out to, let's say the cast's budget's $25 million altogether between all the actors and everything else. Is that really so bad for a blockbuster movie you know is going to make a shit ton of money since it's Batman? Because what's the rest of the budget? Another 150 million probably to make that picture.
Yeah, probably that would be the budget. Sometimes things get weird with who owns the rights to thing. So it was that John Peters, like, oh, what movie was that? It might have been Wild Wild West or like a bunch of other ones, but it's like, it's one of the movies he was attached to it, and he was attached to it the whole way through until it finally got to production. But by the time it got to production, the movie has, like, on the books, it was costing like $300 million to make. And pretty much it was like, essentially 100 million of that was just went to John Peters for being on the books. And then the movie comes out and it's terrible and tanks. And it's like, why this cost $300 million? It's like, well, not all of it went to the budget.
I'm speaking of Robert Pattinson. I'm looking forward to his next movie, or the one that's coming out soon. One with him and Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
Which
The
one's that?
Lighthouse.
Oh, is it the weird black and white one?
Yeah, it's the one the guy who did The Witch is doing.
Okay,
Robert Eggers or something. Yeah, I'll watch it. I like The Witch. That was one of the best horror type movies I've seen in a while. Just because I loved the paranoid atmosphere they created in that movie was great. And I know The Lighthouse is going to be even more of that because it's just two guys on a lighthouse. Just going to go crazy.
Isn't it like based off a true story or something like that too, or is that another?
That was the other one. That was the one me and Grayson went and saw. The Keepers.
Oh, okay.
It's the Elian Moore lighthouse mystery. The 3 lighthouse keepers vanished. They never found their bodies. Don't know what happened. It's one of those stories that, like, what probably happened was they were out fixing something and got swept away by a rogue wave. But, you know, because the people that went to the island and found it, they were like, oh, the oven was still warm and there were still meals on the table and they didn't take their jackets with them. But you don't know if that's true, you know, because it happened at the turn of the last century. So
yeah. I thought of making like a B grade like horror action movie that was based on the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Oh, okay.
Because all that happens is, like, here's this huge ship that sinks. But what if there's like a mystery or something that you can just put on there? It's like, well, we all know the end. This all dies, but here's some aliens or some ghosts and shit on there while you're at it.
Yeah, it's like it was like there's something like the Loch Ness monster in the Great Lakes, and they don't talk about it. Make it like Troll Hunter. Like, we know it's there, but we can't see it with our technology. You know, for some reason.
Because it is, you know, just fucking weird for a ship that big to just like break in half and disappear under the not the sea. It's what the fuck is it? It's a
Great Lakes.
Lake, yeah, lake.
Well, actually, the Great Lakes claimed a lot of ships. It's pretty
like
violent.
It's like
wow.
the Bermuda Triangle of the upper.
Yeah, well, the same kind of effect that happens to like instruments in the Bermuda Triangle actually happens up in Lake Michigan too.
Well, another thing that happens up in Lake Michigan is there's thousands of ships going all the time. And, you know, statistically, it's like they're probably sinking it slightly above it. I know what does the weather gets incredibly violent up there when we go from summer to, or we go from fall, kind of that summer, fall, winter, like they call them like the winds of November or whatever. You can get just these huge, like 50-mile-an-hour winds just blowing the water, you know, like crazy, because you get that weird thermal effect where it's still warm on one side and cool on the other. When that runs together, that's always good things happen. A lot of people die on the Great Lakes doing stupid stuff too. Like the guy that roofed our house, his son died on the Great Lakes because he got drunk, and sometimes it gets so cold up there they're frozen. You just walk to Canada. Well, he decided he was going to do that, and it wasn't quite frozen anymore. He just fell into the ice, like, you know, a half mile out, and they didn't find him till spring. They found his body. It's like, that's a horrible story, dude. He's like, yeah, it was fucked up. I was like, and that's your son? Yeah. When did this happen? Last year. It's like, okay, but the way he delivered the story was like it was something unrelated to him, and kind of like, could you believe such a thing?
Man, this guy tried to walk to Canada and he fucking died in the lake. It's like, who was that? My son.
Yeah, but it was told like a campfire story. So either he was bullshitting me, or
Well, why would you bullshit somebody about
You
yourself?
sound like weirdly energetic about that rather than sad.
yeah, that was.
Well, I got another one.
I got illegitimate kids all over the state, statewide roof. But yeah, that was that's a weird area up there. Been there several times. It's kind of a strange crew that hangs out up there.
That like vaguely reminds me of Triple H from he runs NXT and he's a lot of the reasons why their women's division is really good because he really like promoted women's wrestling.
Yeah.
And it's and I think one of the reasons why is I mean he married Vince McMahon's daughter, but then they had 4 daughters.
Oh, okay.
But every time you hear it's like he has 4 daughters, like you're really going for a son, weren't you?
He's career building. Damn it, my kids are going to be in wrestling. I don't care if they're all girls.
But yeah. Also, Segway. But it's not a Segway if you point it out. So whatever. The most important week in wrestling happened.
And what were the results?
Pretty good. Nothing that you guys would find spectacular. It's like, oh, that's surprising. But so you had AEW had their first TNT show on Wednesday, head to head with the NXT USA show, which was its first time it had 2 hours rather than 1.
Uh-huh.
And if you want to say like if you want to compare like match quality, like the NXT show was probably better because they pretty much just like put together like a mini takeover. It's
Okay.
like they put on a takeover level show for TV, and then AEW pretty much just put on a TV show. I mean,
Okay.
it was fun and enjoyable, but it wasn't anything like. Seemed like they could replicate this, whereas it seemed like NXT kind of threw a lot of shit at the thing. And so I mean, if you want to compare the ratings, AEW won. They got 1.4 million people watched. NXT had dropped. Possibly because of competition from AEW, but they dropped from 1.1 million to 890,000.
Okay.
To 890,000. Now some people are predicting that AEW, like a lot of TV people were like predicting like they might get like 500,000 to watch. So this is like triple that number. So
Yeah.
that's pretty good. It's not amongst cable. It was the second watch show of the night, so that was pretty good. The only show that was watched more was a Major League Baseball playoff game.
Okay.
So, that's a pretty good competition. It got 3 millions. They got 1.4. The show was pretty good, so it was fun. Like I said, it wasn't anything like too spectacular, but it was a fun TV show. Also they filmed some dark matches that weren't on the show, and now they're going to create a separate YouTube channel called AEW Dark, where they show the dark matches on their YouTube show. So that'll be interesting.
Now, why don't those get shown on TV?
Sometimes a dark match is just is done. It's like when we went to that NXT show, there was like 3 or 4 matches that weren't actually on the show.
Yeah, it was the first 2. It was
Yeah.
the tag team War Raiders and somebody else, and then the first female match of the night was
Yeah.
on.
And in that case, those did get shown as so. Like when NXT does a takeover, like they're usually in another city, so they're not going to film a TV show like the next week, and so they kind of like with the clip show and those dark matches that makes up the next TV show for NXT.
Oh, so it's like this kind of pad.
Yeah,
You've already got something. Okay.
but typically what a dark match is just like it's kind of testing the waters. Like let's put this match on and see how the audience reacts to it, and then it's kind of like secretly practice this show or routine, and then like when you think you're ready to do it, like then you'll do it on air essentially. All right,
Oh.
it's also a good place for like young performers to kind of like learn things without like the anticipation of failure or worrying about it. Although it looks like here they're just gonna broadcast them, so it's like, but they won't be live, so there's probably room to edit things and
Yeah.
mistakes and stuff like that. So, but like there was because there's only like 3 matches on the show, so there was like, and they have like a pretty big roster, so it's interesting to see next week, because like usually with WWE, it's like each week it's kind of the same performers put on a match, and they just kind of mix and match them around. Where it's like this one is like, oh, there's a bunch more matches I want to see, but it's like this is only a 2-hour show, and like so. I listened to Dave Meltzer, and he like broke down like all the ratings like really, really intricately, and like the 18 to 34 bracket, like that's the most coveted bracket, and they got a big rating there. It almost tripled what NXT got.
Oh, okay.
Because a lot of like WWE's backbone is like 50 plus.
Yeah. Rush
viewer.
Limbaugh audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like their young audience isn't really there, so it kind of showed that like AEW is involving a different audience than what WWE is. So they're not just like siphoning from WWE; they're kind of creating their own audience. So that seems like a healthy thing. So
Yeah.
but this was their first television show. It was also like in a big arena. It was at where the Capitals play in Washington D.C. And so they had like 14,000 people there. And so that looked impressive, but also they're not going to sell out that big of shows every week. And it was the first show, and so probably next week the rating's not going to be as big. If it grows, like that'd be tremendous, but I kind of doubt it will. It'll probably
or
drop.
even stays anywhere near that level to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it making another 1 million, and that'll be good.
Well, I mean, how the WWE one's been on the air for over a month now, right?
Yeah,
So, but what was their initial, like their premiere episode? What was their rating?
premiere was 1.2 million, and then next week was 1.1 million, and then this week was 890,000. But there's competition.
Well, yeah,
there.
I mean, NFL started, and then also the.
Well, yeah, that's what kills. That's why the AEW wanted to be on Wednesdays. That they're not in competition with football, but also they're not in competition with basketball because TNT shows basketball.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons they're on Wednesdays. But also that Wednesday's not really a wrestling night, so people aren't really conditioned to like watch wrestling on Wednesday. But I don't know. See what happens. I mean, I don't really care about the ratings as long as like they do enough to like stay on air. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Well, good. It sounds like it worked out. Sounds like people are still watching TV somewhat.
Yeah. And then last night you had SmackDown on Fox. So this is the first time.
Oh, yeah.
This is the first time you had wrestling on primetime television or network television in like 30 years. And some people are predicting like this is going to be like do like 4 to 6 million, which that's that'd be great, but like really what Fox like just demands it be above 3 million, like that's what they want, and they end up getting like almost 4 million, like it was like 3.8 million. The true ratings won't be known until Tuesday though.
Oh,
Because like whatever the ratings people, they don't work weekends, so that stuff
Yeah.
won't be compiled till Monday. So that was really good. They thought it might get a bigger bump because The Rock showed up, but he wasn't going to wrestle. He just showed up and talk, which that's pretty much what you want The Rock to do. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think the only time Rock's gonna actually wrestle anymore is he really needs the money.
yeah, and being the highest paid actor in Hollywood, he really needs the money.
I want to go out here and risk injury on my next 3 contracts.
So I can make chicken scratch compared to what I'm making for probably.
I mean,
Jumanji
WWE
3, 4, and 5.
Well, I mean, now the new contracts kick in, so WWE is raking in the money because, like, the next 5 years they're gonna make $2 billion.
Well, I'm just saying, him making one appearance fee,
Yeah.
or maybe being tied in for a year to make multiple appearances, whatever the contract would be for that. But at the same time, that's not going to compare to him, like Nathan said. He's still got an HBO show. He's got like 2 or 3 movies he's probably doing this year, and then whatever endorsements he's doing. That's got to be way more money than
Yep.
just the one WWE contract.
And it was a good show that it actually had a significantly different from the usual WWE production.
Oh,
And that's because of Fox involvement. They wanted to have a more sports-like feel.
okay.
So it does have a more sports-like feel. They started doing things like putting like height and weight and different statistics on the screen, which that's what AEW is doing as well, but they got there first. Like that's kind of like their whole pitch is that wins and losses matter. Here, I think they're just putting like height and weight, but like in AEW, they're like tallying wins and losses and stuff like that.
I would just put a miniature football field on the canvas and be like, oh, headbutted at the 50-yard line. He tackled at the 30.
They got new set designs, and they both look kind of interesting. Raw's new set just basically looks like a giant half pipe.
Okay.
It's like the screen is a half pipe. It's weird. It's interesting, but it's weird. It's not. It seems like the graphics aren't like tailored to the screen they made. But Pyro's back because they got rid of Pyro a long time ago because I guess like it essentially costs like $20,000 to $30,000 like a day to use that shit.
Yeah.
Because so they just like, well, that's a cost we don't need, and so, but now they have the money to put it at that, so Pyro's back.
Takes a platoon of people to engineer that right too.
Yeah, you have to pay the person a lot of money to do it. There's also like all sorts of like safety issues and stuff that you have to like pay people to like look things over and stuff like that. So it's not cheap to run Pyro, but it is
Exciting.
Yeah. They had a bunch of fighters show up from like MMA.
Oh, good.
I think like the current heavyweight like UFC champion was like in the crowd, and like one of the guys like threw another guy towards him, and then like at the end of the match like they got mad and they were like butting heads. So like I guess it was bringing together like the fight audience and like the WWE audience. And then at the end, Brock Lesnar fought Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston's been the champion since WrestleMania, and he comes out there and he beats him in like 5 seconds. So that's we're just kicking Kofi Kingston away. But Brock Lesnar is legitimately one of the most dangerous human beings in the world. So,
right.
I mean, barehanded. Anybody can kill Brock Lesnar with a gun. But
Maybe it hasn't been put to the test.
And then, so immediately after he beats him, then the surprise comes out, and there's a guy named Cain Velasquez. So when Brock Lesnar was in UFC and he was the champion, Cain Velasquez like knocked him out like in the first 5 seconds of a match, and so but they never fought again. So that's like a good bringing together because the MMA audience is like fucking huge. So if you can get any kind of crossover back to wrestling, then that's like a
Yes, I've heard of Cain Velasquez on Joe Rogan.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about him a lot.
And then there's an interesting on AEW or with TNT. There's an interesting crossover. There's there's like a Muay Thai boxing league like out of Singapore called One Championship.
Okay.
And so it looks like they're gonna be on TNT. So like TNT, they're also going to like we need more live sports because our shows aren't doing too well or whatever. And but like it's like linked with AEW, and I think that's like a good thing to do because if you're gonna get people to watch wrestling, it's probably easier to get them from the MMA crowd than from anywhere else because it's just gonna seem too stupid.
It's not going to be like a big Star Trek sci-fi wrestling crossover.
No.
I think they should.
Although SmackDown used to be on the Sci-Fi Channel, which is fucking weird.
Yeah.
I think since USA has a lot of the rights to broadcast golf, they should just do a crossover with that. Just do full on, just like people tackle people to like, try and tee off or do an intimidation to try and putt. I think that'd be a good crossover, get viewers that way.
Just like the two lead American golfers in the British Open, like just getting in each other's face.
Yeah, before they go out to like to drive the range, like they come out to like pyro and shit and entrance music.
I mean, what else would make golf fun to watch? I mean,
that'd make it awesome, but man, you have no actual golf enthusiasts watch that show, but anybody else would be like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, people who didn't even know anything about it. I'm watching battle golf. Tiger Woods is swinging a fucking wood at somebody, but they're all like pre-bent. So
we're gonna play clubhouse rules too, so you gotta drink while you play.
You can get the most intoxicated and still win.
Look at that Tiger Woods banging 5 women and drinking a bottle of champagne on 5.
Look at him go.
Hitting 2 under. This is his game now. He's returned to 4.
Tiger Woods is now fucking the 9th hole.
He's sizing it up for the ball. He wants to make sure it's gonna go in.
The referee doesn't know whether to give him a stroke penalty or not.
He's like 2 pumps. Everybody knows the rules. 2 pumps. No more.
Just make golf erotic and violent.
Par. Fuck that. You are.
I know that they've kind of covered news stories that like every major sport has seen a decline in viewership, basically. Well, NFL's down, NBA's
No,
down.
NFL's up this year.
Oh, NFL's up this year? Okay.
Yes, this year. It's been down the last couple of years, but it's up this year.
I guess this is based upon 2018's numbers, but
Yeah.
every major sport has seen a decline in TV viewership.
Well, I mean, just TV has seen a decline in TV viewership.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I was thinking about, like, God, golf's boring as shit to play, and it's boring as shit to watch. So how the hell? Because every time I go to a fucking restaurant, especially during the weekend or something like that, and like the TV in the corner is always playing golf, and same thing with like TV waiting or
So
and shit.
I don't. The thing about golf is like the same thing about F1,
Yeah.
is that their fans are fucking rich. So you don't need that many fans. You just need, like, when you have a fan base that that Rolex can advertise to, then like that's an expensive fan base, and you can command more ad revenue from that.
Well, I mean, I kind of figure their fans are rich considering one of the whatever. I think it was like Mar-a-Lago they were playing on, like the one fucking tournament I watched recently out of the corner of my eye, where it had a rotating grass stand with a BMW Roadster on it.
Yeah.
Featured in one of the shots. I'm like, well, yeah, you're not getting people fucking drinking Bud Light watching this going like, man, only 5 more cases till I can afford that BMW Roadster.
Yeah, the ad bump you'll never see is tonight's match sponsored by Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes, reach higher. You know, you won't see the wrestling, any really American sport.
Or see the Crackle Barrel advertisement on golf.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be like Red Lobster and Happy Gilmore. You can make it work.
What was my favorite movie? Applebee's and Talladega Nights. and because Applebee's like paid them money. It's like, yeah, just put us in your movie. It's going to be a huge comedy. And the thing about Applebee's was that's where everyone went to get like the kids were like, we can swear in Applebee's. You know, and so like it didn't do the brand because it made it look like, oh, this is where a bunch of miserable hicks go. And but I guess like Applebee's was really pleased with it because actually that's a lot of their customer base. It's like, let's get in our fancy clothes and go to Applebee's. It's like, what?
They're like, believe for Idiocracy, Walmart was going to be the thing, but then they dropped out and Costco just hopped in, and that
Yeah.
seemed to work out pretty well for them.
Yeah. Oh, that's like being in the room with your humor. Like, yeah, we are the titan of overconsumption. We're Costco. Who needs a 55-gallon drum of vodka? We don't know. He's buying it, so.
But yeah, the SmackDown rating was good. I believe it was the second highest rated show of the night. I think only like something on CBS did better,
Yeah.
like a new MacGyver episode or something like that.
Oh shit, that reboot's still on?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, maybe it was the Magnum PI. They're both.
Oh yeah, that's what I forgot that reboot. Shit, jeez.
I didn't even know either of those were bad.
Yeah. I haven't seen one. I mean, like, I loved MacGyver when I was a kid, and it's kind of hard to watch that show now because a lot of it's. I remember that show being smart, and it's kind of pretty stupid. I mean, it still has like cool, like interesting, like science to it that works, but a lot of the show just like it's stupid people ending up in spectacular situations. I mean, it's not like MacGyver's stupid. It's a lot of the, bad character actors or whatever.
They should just have a MacGyver episode where he doesn't actually have like mechanical know-how or any kind of smarts whatsoever. He just gets like his LinkedIn and Snapchat followers to rescue him. Just like, I gotta get on Facebook and tweet this everywhere that I'm in danger. My followers will come, and then just that happens.
I don't know if you got my text about Goliath.
Yeah, I responded to you today.
Yeah, that's right. You did. Yeah, just I'm only halfway through it, so I'm not going to say a lot. But man, this thing just jumped right into like David Lynch, like first 15 minutes of the first episode. It's like, and that's always been a quirky, weird show.
Yeah.
It's like I had weird characters, and what's his name? Billy Bob Thornton does a great job, but Danny McBride's just a weirdo. I mean, essentially, he's a sad drunk, but he's also someone who like leaves himself way open and vulnerable. It's like, oh, all these people want to kill me. I'm going to stay at their hotel for free, and then they're going to fuck with me the whole time. And yeah, so a lot of the stuff in the show is not. It's weird, but it's not weird for the sake of weird. It's because these people there's a lot of psychedelic drugs being used in this show. And it's like, oh, that's weird. This doesn't make any sense. Oh, yeah, these guys were all on drugs. That's why. This isn't just like David Lynch where this happens and people watch this stuff and then nobody responds to it and they move on to the next scene. It's like, no, this is truly weird stuff because these people are on drugs. But the way it's filmed and the way the story unfolds, you're like, what the fuck? And then you realize later, oh.
Is it like Fear and Loathing, but without the special effects?
No, it has some special effects.
Oh, okay.
It's just you don't know what people are doing, and you assume one thing about the characters because they're engaged in dialogue in one scene, and then they'll go into the next scene and it shows you what they're doing, but you don't really know what they're doing, and then it jumps to a dream sequence type thing, but it's not clear that it is a dream sequence. You think the story has progressed now to another scene, and I mean sometimes it is clear that it's a dream sequence, but it's just the usual random weirdness in Goliath that's always been there. It's just a little more amplified because Dennis Quaid's the bad guy.
Oh yeah. That's
Dennis Quaid is a wonderful weirdo. Like he's a weird actor. I don't know what he's.
Yeah, I've heard people like concerned for Dennis Quaid on Twitter. Like he does such a good job that people are concerned about him.
Yeah, is he crazy? Well,
is he turning to Randy?
So yeah, that was.
Oh yeah, I want to get back to wrestling real quick, because this is a huge week of wrestling. Did any of you guys incidentally come across anything that it's like wrestling's happening this week other than me?
Well, I saw some stuff on YouTube. They had some highlights because we watched you send me links to the videos, so now some of it's in my YouTube likes.
Oh, okay.
But they were all summaries of basically the rating stuff that you just went over and who did what, and I know the people were really happy, like you said, about the Fox Sports. Like they kind of changed that around, maybe for the better.
Yeah.
So I did hear things like that. They said like, oh, the production was good. It wasn't. They said they kind of toned down some of the ridiculousness across a lot of it, and they really just made it an engaging thing. Like, I want to see these fights. You know, whatever these guys are doing, they did a good job choreographing, but nothing specific.
Okay.
I just knew to look for that, and like I said, because
I didn't know, because I don't know if you went about your daily life and like there was like an AEW commercial popped up somewhere where like it's like what's this about? Because I didn't know if like how much they're getting the word out. Because I remember you said like you saw a bunch of advertisements for the Fox show like while watching football like last week, like oh they're really promoting wrestling.
I mean the only thing I saw this week was just stuff on Reddit's top thread for like people talking about matches and events and stuff. So I didn't see anything on YouTube because I haven't watched. I think I've watched like one thing on YouTube, but that's been about it.
But yeah, so see what happens. See where this falls. Although I'm interested in too. There's two shows. There's a show. The week of Thanksgiving in Chicago for AEW, which I'd like to go to, but I'm pretty sure there'll be probably family things. Like, and you'll probably have some family thing going on, right?
Usually, I mean, I don't. I'm assuming the day of, but that's never a good assumption.
Well, it's Wednesday, so it's like it's
the day before.
Just day before Thanksgiving, but still at 3 hours.
I'd be at work.
Oh, okay.
Day before Thanksgiving in Chicago sounds like a blast.
Well, that's why I like would be concerned about is that like okay, either that'd really suck because everybody's going to Chicago for their families, or it'd be cool because everyone's fucking leaving Chicago to go to their family.
I mean, if I didn't work, I'd be up for it.
But then the next week after that is in Champaign, Illinois. They're having another AEW show.
Oh, okay.
Which it's not Chicago, but it's a 4-hour drive.
Yeah.
And like the Chicago drive's like 3 hours, so this is like an extra hour, but like
is
you don't
it
have
the
to go
same
through
thing as
Chicago.
Last time, where it's just a generic lot, and whatever number you get, and if you don't get a high enough number.
I mean, no, because they're not like selling out the whole stadium like they were a couple other times. Like their tickets are available now,
Oh, okay.
and like although I wasn't able to like just pick my ticket, there was like it's like a I was like looking at it and it was like a ring of there's like these different color rings and that's what like what you go for, and like I think the most expensive ticket's like $100 and those are like ringside seats, and it goes down to like $20.
Oh,
Which that's pretty decent compared to like what WWE charges.
oh
so.
yeah, because
But I didn't know if those that's like December whatever, like 4th or something like that. So I didn't know if you guys would be you Nathan, you probably would be interested in driving. That'd be like a 6-hour drive for you.
14-hour drive. Well, let's see. Thanksgiving, I got her family, or her brother, his family. And then Christmas, usually I leave Christmas open because that's unless they really fuck us in the contract, I get, it gives me like a week just to relax.
Yeah. But right now they're only touring on the East Coast and doing some stuff in the Midwest. Like I expect they'll probably do a show in Detroit at some point, and they'll probably do a show in Minneapolis. And for right now, they're not going to the West Coast. There's reasons for that, but I forget why. But they won't be there this year for the West Coast.
maybe it's just getting venues locked down and paying.
Well, I mean, there was something weird with WWE because California just signed that law where it's like you can't. It's that whole independent contractor thing. You can't just like. It's basically whatever what WWE does is like. You're exclusively under contract with us, but you're an independent contractor, so we don't have to pay your health insurance and shit like that. Like, basically, California made that illegal.
Yeah.
Is that tied into paying college athletes too? Because they signed that into law this week.
Maybe, I'm not sure. Probably. But then I found out like how AEW's kind of thing worked, because like Tony Khan was talking about like, and Tony Khan seems like an interesting guy. He also seems like a rich kid, and this wrestling league is his play toy. But he also, he seems like he's a hardworking guy, and he seems to be having a blast doing this. So that's fun. He's not just a stupid, spoiled rich kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, he talked about they do the media scrums afterwards. Not for everything, but for big events, they'll have like a media there where like they'll stand in front of it. And it'll be like like after a basketball game, like you have to talk to media. It's like that, and usually like people like WWE would never fucking do that. It's like, we're not giving you a live mic. We want everything to be pre-written and all that stuff and agreed upon beforehand. So like this, but also it's weird because it's like all these wrestling reporters who are used to like getting the shaft from WWE. It's like, we're not telling you fucking shit, and then they just like, okay, well I guess we'll just speculate, and so here and also like they'll interview the wrestlers, but like it's always like confusing what their role is. Like, am I interviewing the person playing the wrestler, or am I interviewing the wrestler now? And it goes back and forth all the time, really. Because like sometimes the wrestler,
the Frinick interview we're doing.
Because like sometimes one person will come up and they'll do the interview as their character, and they don't break character. And then the next person comes up and they're just like explaining like behind the scenes stuff, and it's like weird, but it's fun. I don't know.
So who's the method man and who isn't?
Yeah. But yeah, so the whole healthcare thing. So Tony Khan, essentially, as much as he could, he created a bunch of like, sort of like front end, like jobs, like administrative stuff or like online stuff, like or coaching work and stuff like that. And basically, like if you work 5 days a week for AEW, you get healthcare because you are a full-time employee. Otherwise, you are a part-time employee because they only have one show a week. And so if you're just a person that comes in and works that one show, it's like you're not a full-time employee, you're a part-time employee.
Right.
But there was like something different, like Jon Moxley, his wife works for WWE as an announcer, and because that position, that's like a full-time employee, she gets health care. And so Jon Moxley doesn't have the AEW health care because he uses his wife's health care from WWE. It's a weird wrinkle.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's enough wrestling.
Okay, so we read a book this week.
You want to do the book or the comic book?
What do you want to do first, guys?
Doesn't matter to me.
I can probably breeze through the comic book. I've already forgotten most of it by now. But...
No.
I just read the first one, so
Oh, is there multiple?
it was a 3-part comic. I just read the very first one.
Oh, okay.
Well, the 3-part. What? It ends on a conclusion. There's no continuation.
Or, well, what did I got?
Did you get the part where basically it becomes Krypton and then there's a whole loop going on?
No, I got the one. Let's see, it started in the 50s,
Yeah.
and then it went into the 60s and 70s, and then that was it.
Oh, no, it goes like
present
1,000
day.
years in the
And then,
future.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, well, I didn't. They didn't have the one condensed book, so I had to buy them separately.
Yeah, I think like
Well, no, 'cause
it was
they-
like a 3-part
I didn't
comic
know
book
if Nathan was
series.
alluding to like they're doing.
So did you
more-
just ordered like the first comic and there's like 3 in the series?
Yeah, well, I got the first 2 at the local comic book store, and they said they get
Oh.
the one in. Then I never followed up.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So
Well,
I
this will be weird.
Well, to make sure that comic book store never gets money for the third one, let's talk about that whole story.
So it's Superman Red Sun, and essentially the premise is like, what if Superman landed in Soviet Russia rather than America?
yeah,
And yeah, so yeah, it starts in it starts in the 50s. Yeah, and then it starts out like it's like in America, and they're like looking at like it's the Superman. He's like this menace or whatever, and then you actually get to meet Superman. It's like, oh, Superman's a good person. He's just in Russia.
Yeah, I mean, his whole motto still is that he'll help anybody that needs help. And I mean, yeah, he thinks about everybody being in the Soviet Union as his comrades and his people, but at the same time, he actively stops things around the world still.
Yeah, because like that's what like Lex Luger sets up an incident to like kill a bunch of people just to see if Superman will stop it, and he does, and he's like, oh, interesting, because Lex Luger's an asshole.
I like how Jimmy Olsen works for the CIA in this.
Yeah.
And the camera guy. Yeah, so that's like, yeah, and the U.S. government is beholden to Lex Luthor as their like anti-Superman, because it's all paranoia. So
Although the thing I hate with Lex Luthor is I hate every time they try to like hammer home how intelligent he is.
yeah,
So he's always like, oh, he's playing 50 chess games. Like, I read 13 books this morning. Like, fuck you. Like, no. Just have him be smart. You don't have to prove it.
It's like you walk into somebody's office all the time. It's like, you were just interrupting me while I was doing Bushido.
Yeah.
Like, and doing all like every time you talk to them, it's like them talking about their accomplishments. No, that just means they're dumb.
There's that weird part where like Brainiac like tackles Lex Luthor, and he's like, he was 20 words away from making you kill yourself. I was like, that's the stupidest thing. This is written by Mark Millar, who is I hear it's Millar, but it might be Miller. It's Millar. He's very famous. So like he did like the Wanted series, Kingsman.
MPH.
What's MPH?
It's like a drug gang fucking thing where it's like the drugs you take give you superpowers and shit.
Oh.
I never actually read that one. There's another one where it's like, it's not even superpower one, it's just like a guy fucks a girl and then he like freaks out and gets her pregnant, but then he dumps her and then the other guy picks up his slack or whatever. It's like a comic book, just that's the whole story. There's no superpowers, no anything. And it's like his most divisive comic book is everybody hates it, but he's like, it's just a story. Like,
He did the Ultimates, which was kind of a reboot of the Avengers, which kind of like gave a lot of momentum to the Avengers movies that later came out. In that, what was it? So Mark Millar likes to do a lot of stunt casting for his comic books, so he will essentially cast an actor in a comic role and just like base their image off the actor, and so that's where you got Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. That came from the Ultimates.
oh, okay,
So like in the Ultimates, Nick Fury is Samuel L. Jackson in the comic book, and then like Brad Pitt's like Thor and Johnny
Eminem's
Depp.
in Wanted,
Yeah, Eminem's in Wanted. Johnny Depp is Iron Man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he does a lot of stuff like that. So.
Which was probably close to what their second choice was for casting for
Yeah,
Iron
yeah.
Man, or maybe even their first choice. And then,
But yeah, I believe this comic book is widely regarded as like one of the best Superman comic books ever. Well, I'm not sure ever written. It's just like nice. It's an interesting spin-off of Superman.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting alternate history.
What else want to say about this? But yeah, it looks like you missed the whole last part because essentially,
Well, I remember like America's in social collapse by the late 70s.
yeah.
And they were trying to
Also, like Stalin has a heart attack, and Superman quickly like flies to a hospital to a college, and essentially just like reads all the college. He essentially just becomes a doctor overnight by quickly reading all the books in the library, which I'd never seen like them people do that with Superman. It's like, oh, he's also super smart and he has this capability. I've never seen somebody do that with Superman before, but he can't save Stalin. And then there's always that stuff with Russia where like they always, Russia always needs a strong leader, and so like essentially, what do you call it? Is that the premier or what's the leader of Russia? What do you call that?
Soviet time. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think premier would work.
So like everybody wants Superman to be the premier, and so he reluctantly takes that role and kind of sort of loses his way while doing that, but also Lex Luthor is like fucking with him, and he sends Bizarro Superman after him, and like while they're fighting, like a bunch of people die, but then when like a nuclear weapon's about to hit something, like Bizarro Superman like has a sudden change of heart and sacrifices himself to save the world.
Yeah,
I can't remember the reasoning behind that, other than like, was it just that he has a little bit of Superman in him, and that
basically, I mean, because I know Lex Luthor is really pissed off because Bizarro beat him at chess, because that had to be a story arc as well. Lex Luthor had to be pissy that Superman beat him in his own game and shit.
Also, Lois Lane is married to Lex Luthor, but they're like barely married. It's basically just a marriage in name only at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, because wasn't England going to be destroyed?
Yeah, like London, they tried to attack London with like a satellite or whatever.
Yeah, and that's when Bizarro Superman sacrifices himself. It was something like that.
But yeah, then Lex Luthor just basically keeps sending superior whatever after him, or team, or some disaster plot against him, and failing until eventually he becomes president, and then enacts his ultimate plan to kill Superman and USSR.
But Lex Luthor turns around America.
Yeah.
So like through his smarts, he's able to like turn around America and make them really successful. But then like Brainiac
was almost more like Ozymandias from Watchmen in the
yeah.
He wasn't just evil for this. I mean, he was evil, but it wasn't just for the sake of being evil. Like he really felt there was like, well, I've got to do this bad stuff, but there's a reason.
Well, there's also the weird turn for Superman, because there's so he like converts Brainiac over to like, a Brainiac's gonna work for us, and then basically any citizen that gets out of hand, they essentially just like lobotomize them and put some weird thing on, and like, now you're a good working citizen, which that's fucking evil for Superman to be okay with.
Yeah.
But he's remorseful of it later on. But yeah, it seems really fucking weird at the time. It's also around the time when they bring around the Russian Batman, which he's weird because like it's Russia, so it's not like he comes from money, so it's like purely underground terrorism that Batman is.
Yeah, and doesn't he get killed, and then that becomes like the uniform of the Resistance?
Yeah.
It was something like that. Yeah.
And Wonder Woman has like a weird. I almost thought like she didn't need to be part of the comic book at all, because I didn't really understand why she really needed to be in it.
I think it's because
an alternate love interest for Superman.
Yeah, because like
he didn't reciprocate at all.
Yeah, well, it's like I did like because like Superman didn't have like a Russian Lois Lane, so all he
Yeah.
had was Wonder Woman.
Well, yeah, I know. Like the whole thing was like this super race to lead the Soviet
Yeah,
Union
yeah,
in
yeah.
the next era, and I got that part. But like after that, it was just like basically like, oh yeah, then unrequited, love or relationship back, and he kind of ruins her with the confrontation with Batman and stuff like that. So she's broken after that and almost useless, and basically needs to be taken care of or watched. And after that, I was just like, yep, you're totally useless. Like you're not, like you serve no part of the story, other than a distraction later. But it's just kind of like, well, okay. I mean, I thought maybe at least integrate in the story more and actually make a relationship carry through to Superman, or do something different with it besides just like, oh look, after like the halfway point, she's not in the book anymore.
And I can't remember what the final confrontation is, but it's like involves Brainiac and Lex Luthor and a note in a pocket.
Okay.
Well, I mean, as far as I knew, it was just like Lex Luthor snuck aboard Brainiac's ship while Superman was there, and then
Yeah, but then like Brainiac takes over Lex Luthor, and then like you find out like Brainiac is like
oh yeah, the note
wasn't
that
in contr-
Lois Lane gives Superman so he stops the attack
yeah.
or whatever, where it was.
Oh yeah, because they're gonna attack America for some reason.
They were attacking America and they were
Oh.
about to win, and then Lois Lane just hands him an envelope with like a sentence scrawled on it, and then he like totally breaks down crying and
Yeah.
just leaves.
Well, no, he goes to like he like breaks down because like that was like he won. You're gonna kill yourself, Superman, and he goes to save the planet from something, and essentially it's like, oh, he blew up, but he actually didn't. This just gave him the opportunity to like step away from the world, and he essentially becomes Clark Kent, and just not Superman anymore. So nobody knows who he is. He's just a durable Russian or whatever. Or he just goes around the world doing whatever. And that's where like Lex Luthor takes over, and he actually like turns all of Earth around like in a good way, and then it goes even like thousands of years further in the future, and Earth just becomes the new origin point for like it just becomes Krypton.
Oh, so it launches another adventure.
Yeah, just like the world is collapsing under itself, it launches a new Superman to another planet, and like it just like continues the cycle. And they do some wordplay where it, like they from Lex Luthor you get Kal-El or some shit like that. I can't remember. They did some wordplay with that.
Oh, okay. So they even did the names.
yeah.
Well, to me, like the ending sequence where they launched the capsule, it wasn't a space capsule; it was a time capsule where they sent the baby back in time.
Oh, was
To
okay.
reverse the time flow and not make it the Krypton it was. That
Oh yeah, because didn't they
destroyed.
say something wasn't the sun like red shifting?
Yeah,
And so like they
we'll
send
send
him back to
the
a-
days where the sun wasn't red. So
Yes.
he's gonna be weirder and more powerful. But this is so yeah.
Yeah, so then Superman Red Sun has another double meaning.
Because you almost don't know. Because I don't know with the panels the way they're laid out. Like it almost seemed like maybe it was giving us the hint that's what the story was all along, or
Yeah.
maybe it still all happened again.
Yeah.
It just keeps doing it over and over again until it gets it right.
yeah.
Because maybe if Superman had conquered everything and made his vision the whole thing, then nobody would have, Krypton wouldn't have happened or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, there's been rumors that there's going to be another, not Red Sun, but another Soviet superhero book
Huh.
that's in the works.
Well, they're doing a lot of weird shit with Batman, aren't they?
I
Because
don't,
like they had that Gotham by Gaslight, and there's like that
Yeah.
samurai one.
I don't know. I think it might be Batman, but I can't remember if it's Superman.
Well, who would you
again
like it to
or if
be?
it's- What?
Who would you like it to be?
Somebody actually in the Marvel universe instead of
Oh, okay.
in DC. Because, I mean, everybody, they kind of touched on almost every freaking. They touched on Green Lantern, they touched on Aquaman, they touched on fucking Wonder Woman, they touched on pretty much all the major iconic ones of today. I mean, I guess they could do, like, some minor one and build it up, like, do a Soviet Green Arrow or something like that, but I don't know how you'd make that, like, a big stakes thing.
Yeah.
It's a huge marquee comic book. But, like, if you did, like, I don't know, like a Spider-Man or something, Soviet for Marvel, like maybe even like a Soviet or a Soviet Deadpool or something like that. It'd be really weird.
Do the Russians have comic books? Do they do that over there?
Yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah, I
think
mean,
every
you
other
see the
society has-
propaganda. They're doing something.
Yeah. Putin man.
I mean, shit, if there's comic books just for people to masturbate to, I think that Russia can have comic books. Makes sense.
masturbation comics.
Well, I remember some of they were reprints of the original factory runs from like the 60s and like Silver Age of comics and stuff like that my uncle gave me. But just like the way the advertisements used to work for certain things, like, kids, go out and get your Winchester rifle. Here's a 2-page comic book about you buying a Winchester rifle and how fun it's going to be. And that used to be a full-fledged advertisement they printed in a comic book. I mean, yes, it kept with the theme so you didn't break up the reader's what I want to say, their interest in the story or their interest in the material, but at the same time, like, I don't know if that was actually effective or not. Like, it seems like it
I
probably
mean, they
was.
sold the ad space, so it worked for them.
Yeah, I mean, if they used to sell stuff by comic strip, then I don't see why you can't do anything else with comics.
I don't know the last time I've seen a comic with like an advertisement in it that wasn't just like more comics.
Yeah, because
Like I don't know, like a comic with like, get your X-ray specs or anything shit like that.
Well, that's the thing. I bought in like the recent like Copperheads. Like, these are all independent more than getting like DC and Marvel. I do have a few of those that are newer. But yeah, like the back 2 pages are, it's either teasers for other comics, like the first couple of pages of a comic that they're trying to get hype up for.
Yeah.
Or it's like, oh, look at this cover for this month of this comic, or look at this scene, or look at that.
But I mean, I imagine back in that time, like comic books were like, it was like a quarter, so like you had to subsidize the cost with advertising. Now like comics are way more expensive, so like you're probably just paying for the cost of the comic book.
I mean, shit, I remember when I was a kid where there was advertisements for, you get a Foot Locker of like fucking army men with like D-Day boats and shit like that, and like a whole, I mean, for like 1960, like $45 was definitely a huge price.
Yeah.
Or whatever, but it's like you cut out the coupon and you send the check and mail it.
Yeah.
And it was like, I even wanted that shit when I was a kid in the fucking 90s. I was like, that'd be really cool. All of a sudden, like, oh, this is really old. You can't buy this anymore. Okay. But no, I remember even in the 90s having comics where it's like, yeah, you had Super Nintendo games advertised on and bubblegum and soda and movies. Like, there's Mallrats fucking advertisements in some of my 90s fucking comics and shit, so...
Oh yeah, that reminds me, more wrestling. Jade Silent Bob are at AEW.
Oh, really?
As part of the show, or just
Yeah.
Or what did they do?
Not much. In a backstage segment, they were showing off the tag team titles because they haven't showed those off yet. And then they had like a little angle where they were in the front row, and a tag team came up and were like making fun of them, saying like their movie sucked, and then another tag team came in and like defended them.
Oh, okay.
They're basically promoting their movie. Also, Jericho is in the new movie, and so he invited them to like be at the show. So I'll see more, because I don't think they realize like Jericho's the big bad heel, and like they're supposed to be like the good guys, but no, whatever. It's all the same.
Yeah.
And speaking of that movie, I finally, I didn't realize it was coming out so soon, because I thought it was probably closer to the end of the year, not like this month.
Yeah.
But I saw a clip again of it, and I'm like, that looks really rough, and I don't know if I'm gonna like that movie or not.
Yeah, I'm not like, I mean, I'll watch it eventually, but I'm not really hyped to see it. But
no, I mean, neither am I, which is kind of unfortunate, because
I mean, like, I don't know. It seems like Kevin Smith, a lot of his latest movies, they're not for me, but like they're like, I don't think they're necessarily like, I don't know, they're just weird. I don't mind that they exist, but they're not like great art or anything like that. So.
Oh, because you see I think it's like Vine Comics, something like that. It's a YouTube channel, but they do this celebrity comic book shopping where they go and like they pick out issues and have them explain. It's usually people that are in a comic movie or about to be in a comic movie, but they are doing him, Kevin Smith, and they took him to the Golden Apple in Los Angeles and having him shop for stuff. And they're explaining to him like Saga and stuff like that, and he's talking about how he wants to write more comics and get more involved in that process of it instead of actually doing more movies and stuff like that. So I'm kind of more excited since I've read his Daredevil and I've read other comic books he's done, and kind of like, because you read it.
Did you read The Widening Gyre?
I haven't read that one yet.
Okay. I only one I read of his. I read one of his Daredevil ones.
Yeah, the Daredevil one's a solid series. He did Batman. I haven't read that one. Supposedly the Jay and Silent Bob and Clerk comics are good, but I have no.
He did a run on Green Arrow or an Arrow, didn't he? Green
Yeah,
Arrow?
that's what I wanted to check out because he actually mentioned that on the interview when he was talking about that. Because he was like, yeah, back in the day when I got a tour of DC, we were going by offices and I saw it was the guy that was running Green Arrow at the time. So I stuck my head in his office and like, I could do a really awesome story for you for Green Arrow. I can make it a top book, I swear. And then like a year later, he says he gets a call and then like, yeah, let's work on this.
Yeah, I can't remember the hook. Wasn't this kind of like a man at a time thing with that? I can't remember. There was like an interesting hook to the whole.
I don't know. I need to look at it again because
Okay.
I totally forgot about it until he mentioned it in the interview. Because he also
I think for that Widening Gyre, I think it's Widening Gyre is the Batman one he did, but he came up with an interesting villain. His villain's called Automatopoeia, which an automatopoeia is a word that like makes a sound.
Okay.
It's like bam, biff, stuff like that. It's like the Batman, the old Batman stuff. So that's the villain, and like, so that's like incorporated as like this weird fourth wall breaking things. Like he's like saying these words, and they're like doing things in the real life of the comic. So it's fucking weird.
Sounds like something a stoner would come up with.
Yeah.
I mean, he seems like he still has good ideas for stuff. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't really want if he ever did a movie again. I really didn't want it to be another Jay and Silent Bob movie because
Well, apparently Clerks 3 is green, so they got greenlit that. So, which I was a big fan of Clerks 2 as well. Some people are like fuck Clerks 2.
why would they want it not like Clerks 2? That was a good.
I don't know, they're just really big fans of the first Clerks, and they thought that was just like some kind of lame cash in, but no. It's not Clerks 1, but it's like it has a weirdly like it's funny, it's stupid, but it has also this weird central like character building thing that was completely unexpected.
I don't think it didn't. I mean, I thought it worked just fine because it's still the same environment. You're just expanding the family a little bit and including some more characters.
Yeah.
But also, you're keeping the same environment. You're not changing out retail for something else. It's still real world problems with people that are real people in real life.
Yeah.
So I didn't think it was a bad idea to do that. Plus, it's.
I mean,
how
it
many
wasn't
years-
necessary, but like
Well, I mean, how many years after the fact? Wasn't it like 15 or so years?
it was like almost 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years after the original, and you expect it to be exactly the movie you wanted it to be.
No, but it's also I think the people just thought it was a cheap cash in, but also like it's Kevin Smith. It's like the movies he gets made are the movies that are like Jay and Silent Bob adjacent movies. Like he's not getting other movies made very much. I mean, you got Tusk and Yoga Hosers made. Red State got made. That's a good movie, but
Yeah, and I keep forgetting to buy a copy of that before it like becomes so expensive you can't buy a copy. But I mean, I more or less like would like to see Mallrats 2. Not because
Eh.
no, it's not because I love the first one so much. I do like that movie, but I think the second one would be a good follow for him based upon just commentary of like, oh yeah, no one goes to malls anymore. We can just like make this a total huge like fucking do whatever we want kind of movie because you literally could do that. Or do
the Fall
another
of Man, Silent Bob, Mallrats 2 movie.
Yeah, the second Mallrats where they become like weird online urbex people. They go around to malls that have been abandoned and just record video, which is a big thing on YouTube. But they have wacky adventures with whoever.
So I guess
What goes on in New Jersey.
I guess we better hop into the book because we only got like an hour left.
Got an hour to cover a 500-page book. So yeah, we read or listened to or consumed Eric Larson's Devil in the White City,
A Pulitzer Prize winning book.
which was not a book I knew what to expect, anything about it.
Andrew recommended it to me. When did you first hear about it?
Oh, I first heard about it like 9 years ago now.
Like, did you hear about it because it won the Pulitzer Prize? or
No, I
just-
didn't hear about it from that. I just
Okay.
heard about it because somebody I went to what was his name? I think it was. That's how bad it is. Like a friend I had at UNI that recommended the book to me. I don't remember his fucking name anymore. It was Glenn. But anyway, so we took his class together, a history class, and he was talking about history outside of class, and he was like, "Oh, we read Eric Larson's new book." I'm like, "Who's Eric Larson?" It's like, "Oh, it's Devil in the White City." And I was like, "Oh, okay. What history is that?" "Oh, the Chicago World's Fair and a serial killer." I'm like, "Oh, so it's fiction?" No, it's a real, it's a real story. I'm like, oh, really? And so I checked it out from you and I's library at the time, and then I bought a copy shortly afterwards because it was an awesome book, and I've read it 3 times now. And each time I reread it, I'm like, how did I forget that was in there? That's fucking unbelievable. Why the fuck did I forget that? I mean, there's so much stuff in that book, though. It's easy to forget some of that stuff because there's so much to digest from the whole thing because it does such a good job. Like, you think it'd be piecemeal trying to cover not only like a serial killer's moving.
Well, I don't know. Like, I don't. Some things that didn't fit well with me maybe the second time going through is that it feels like 2 books crammed together.
Yeah, but he kind of does.
Because like every time I go through it, like I'm more engrossed with everything around about the World's Fair, like all the technical details, all the things like, oh, we're gonna sing this guy out and like, yeah, get a group of pygmies together. We're gonna show them off at the World's Fair. You have 3 years to do it, or some shit like that, or whatever.
He had like a year and a half to get to South America
For a
trying to get
rumor
back.
of people that exist. And then, but every time we get to was it John H.H. Holmes or
H.H. Holmes.
H.H. Holmes? Did he have a first name or was it just H.H. Holmes?
He had varying. He had
Or
a
am
lot
I
of
just
different
combining
names.
porn and John Holmes?
His real name was Herman Webster Mudgett.
Yeah.
Well, that was really his name.
Yeah.
Indiana.
But like every time we get back to the serial killer part, like I just kind of care less. It's like, I mean, it's like fascinating because if you consider like his contemporary is Jack the Ripper, like this guy, like ultimately like whatever his ultimate kill count was like far
Yes.
far more terrifying than what this guy is. But
And the things this guy did, that's where it's like, that's where because the stuff about the World's Fair, the Columbia National Exhibition, because I love like this tales from this time, because this is kind of the end of one era and the beginning of another, and you can sort of see it. And but yeah, the stuff that was going on, the terms they were using, it's like, oh, this is really antique-y, but you could see where they were going with it. And but the thing with this H.H. Holmes is like, oh, if this guy was just running around slashing people's throats, that'd be bad enough. No, we're gonna build a murder fortress in the middle of Chicago, where we're gonna have a gassing room and a place where you can cremate people alive, and then we're gonna have like weird sidekicks that'll help. He's a bone guy, you know. He can get the skeleton out of a body. He's really good at it. It's like, oh, that's a job back then, because I guess medical schools were of course short of corpses, so this was a thing you could do to. But yeah, this guy was a complete psychopath, and it was true. Like if you made this up in a book, it'd be like, oh, that's dark. But no, this guy was a meticulous. Not only was he a psycho that he killed women, but he did it for financial gain. And everyone who met him was like, he's so charming. And he fucked all of the people over that owed him money and kept doing it. Like, because the backdrop to this story was the great big economic collapse that was coming at that time. But yeah, this is something that almost, like the World's Fair stuff is like, you know, these people are real. You've heard something about this. I know the Ferris wheel was introduced here and a lot of other things. And but I did not know about this serial killer guy. And I had to stop sometimes when I was looking at this, like, let me go check this out. Let's see. It's like, is this embellished? And nope, it's not. This guy was really this nuts. And it was interesting how they paralleled it, though. Because you had on one side, you had this plucky city of Chicago, which essentially was just a large slaughterhouse at that time, trying to be this world city. And they beat New York out for the World's Fair, and they were going to beat Paris. And so these guys had huge ambitions and really trying to be like the best of humanity. And then in the same city, you had some guy like, hey, can I get people to, hey, can you help me make a crematorium room in my weird, pharmacy / murder palace? And doing it and just getting away with it for a long time.
I think that's like my disconnect is that it's just like the backdrop of the fair like allows this guy to do it because it seems like people are distracted, but there's no like who's the main architect that we follow in the book?
Burnham.
Like there's no like like they sat at a bench one day and like he had a conversation with
No, they
H.H.
never
Holmes. No, like that never happened.
These stories never really intersect, other than they happen in the same city at the
Yeah.
same time.
Well, probably the closest one was the book that had the most recent historical revelation, where it has the telegraph being invented and the guy that's killing people is a doctor, supposedly, and burying him in his coal basement, because it was that guy's invention that directly caught him, or whatever. And that was probably the most direct connection, besides them just existing in the same city at the same time.
Oh yeah, I didn't know about that.
But at the same time, I mean, the book is structured narratively, I think, to be not only the rise, like you said, of Chicago trying to be a better city, be a bigger city in the world's eyes, but also him going from random guy that killed people in multiple places to establishing a base in Chicago and really growing powerful and more, outgoing as far as killing people and new ways to do it and better ways to do it and just more scale.
Constantly taking life insurance policies out
Yeah.
on his employees and killing them.
But then also the culmination of the World's Fair ending, but then also his tenure in Chicago ending and his career as a serial killer ending. So it
Yeah.
all narratively ties as a rise, a crest, and a fall.
Yeah.
So there's no big seesaw between like, oh yeah, the World's Fair is over, but now let's concentrate on him. He's on the rise and he's going places, and then. So I mean, yes, there's the architecture was very well focused on, and that was the meat of the book. If you actually go through page count, like for a 500-page book, that was probably 350 pages of a 500-page book. So I mean, the serial killer parts weren't long, but if you go into his notes for his, his references for material, there's already 3 books written about the guy. It seems like since there's not a really good accurate depiction, since they didn't know what was going on the whole time he was in Chicago, and there was not a good victim count or anybody he really killed for the most part, and the only real records are after he fled Chicago. There's not a big meat for story there where you're gonna fill a 500-page book with.
Yeah.
Besides just speculation and hearsay, and he's always been a very, like you said, Nathan, where you're inspecting embellishment because all this stuff couldn't have possibly happened this way. But he's very fact driven. He doesn't like putting stuff in his book that people just literally like, that probably happened.
I always like the little details, like how, like Chicago is essentially a swamp, and they have to figure out ways how to build. Like the only way to do it is like you have to like go down to the bedrock, but then like to dig down that deep, you have to like put so much air pressure in the pockets you're building to keep the water out. That like the people down there digging are getting the bends because from the air pressure. It's like that's fucking fascinating.
Oh yeah, everything about this book was This book is a dense tome, and it's all really interesting. There was never a time where I was like, oh come on, this is dragging. It's like, no, they always like the whole thing with the Ferris wheel. Like the engineering, and I didn't know the Ferris wheel was invented by a guy named Ferris until I read this book. I had no idea. I thought it was called the Ferris wheel because it was made out of steel. I didn't know that. Oh, that's the guy's name was Ferris. I always thought it was Ferris, like it's Ferris metal. But it's like, yeah, they did. How'd they make this Ferris wheel work? Because not only was this thing huge, and they didn't have lightweight construction aluminum and stuff back then, and they couldn't engineer stuff to hold lightweight metals to hold. I mean, those carriages weighed 900 pounds. And then this thing had to spin, and I forget how many of those carriages it had, but it spun on this central hub. And it's like, how did they make the bearings, and how did they know they would last? Because you didn't prototype shit. It was all based on math. It's like, well, if a bearing is this size and it has this shaft and it spins at this RPMs, mathematically, it will work. But you're just taking into account the weight and the mass that it takes to drive this thing, not like wind and stuff, which wind comes into this later. And so, yeah, all the little details like that were amazing.
Also, there's like tons and tons of buildings that were just built
Yeah.
to never survive the fair.
Nope. I mean, they did make one survive the fair, but that was more of, hey, it didn't burn down or it didn't get demolished right away, so they kept it. But,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the amount of time, effort, and ingenuity, and just stress, and just like, oh my god, are we gonna finish it? And the money, especially during economic hard times, and they just like, nope, we're just gonna fucking tear everything down and burn it all to the ground afterwards. It's like,
Yeah, they even had elaborate ideas of how they wanted to destroy it. Like they wanted the last day of the fair to be the last day these buildings existed, and they threw ideas around, but the city of Chicago wasn't all, all in on, yeah, let's bring a bunch of dynamite into this. But yeah, that was it was some amazing personalities.
And there was like this weird, like, it was like a nationalistic thing to like, we're gonna fight France to be
Yeah.
like we're the top designers, and there's like also this weird like post Civil War thing where like we need to prove that America is better than what it is, and
Yeah.
and this like this is also probably like where that phrase comes out, like the turn of the century, take on all comers. Like
Yeah.
that. This is like those. This is like that phrase. This is like all these people. Like
Well, this was when I read this book, one thing that struck me is like this was a different America. This was an America of just big ideas, not necessarily great plans, but really big ideas. And it's like we can do this because we must. It was shit like that. Of course, everything wasn't run by insurance companies and lawyers back then, but there were a lot of them around.
I mean, do you have the list of like the people that attended the famous people that attended the fair?
Oh, I could look it up. I got some notes
Because
here.
I think it's like one of the first like paragraphs in the book, but yeah,
And
it's
in
like
the book,
it's
too, it
crazy. What were you saying?
Oh, in the book it talks about it too. It does have some of like the highlights of people like Mark Twain and people like that.
Yeah, it's like
Visited
Mark
the fair.
Twain and fucking the electric guys, Thomas
Nikola
Edison
Tesla
and
and,
Tesla.
Yeah.
Was it like Buffalo Bill and what, Annie Oakley?
They weren't part of the fair. They
Yeah.
wouldn't come in because they said they wanted too much money. Then when they became a bigger draw than the fair initially, they decided to cut them in. Let me see. Famous people. Oh, the electric chair was introduced at this. too.
Cracker
Mhm.
Jacks, oatmeal.
Humane form of.
Pabst Blue Ribbon, because it was the best beer there. It got a blue ribbon for being
Never
the best
changes
beer.
formula since.
Yeah.
If that was the best beer back then, then imagine the shit they were drinking.
They didn't have like, things like refrigeration and stuff.
Oh
Just
yeah.
Sci-fi.
Well, they
content.
did have a refrigeration museum or whatever, where they had the ice rink and they had that giant fire and stuff. And they did have like a whole refrigeration car thing too. The guy tried to start up afterwards, but yeah, they didn't. I know they didn't have like a bunch of ice drinks and shit all over the place and purified water. Even though
It wasn't like root beer or like a sundae created here or some shit like that. Some dessert that was
I
created.
think root beer might have been. I don't think it was. I think it was root beer.
Or maybe it was a root beer float or something.
Because they only talked about the water filtration and the creek thing for the first part of the book, and then they never talked about it after it again. Because they talked about the whole thing of like, well, we'll have people charge them a penny a cup for filtered, clean water, or let them drink sewage water out of the river for free and see which one they want. And then they never really addressed that afterwards, which one went over better, since they were worried about the cholera epidemic and all the other crap that came with it.
I like the was it the royalty from Spain? What was her name?
Oh yeah, like the Duchess, or not the Duchess, the Princess, and stuff
Yeah.
that came here, and then everybody invited her everywhere and wanted her to do all this stuff, and she just basically said, "Fuck you all, do whatever damn well please."
Yeah,
And she ate
I
like
want-
brats and beer in Germantown instead of all this highfalutin functions she was invited to, and then everybody took offense and told her wanted her to get the fuck out of town.
Yeah, she managed to offend a lot of people. Because Americans have never been good with royalty, so we don't know how to treat that. We still not, because it's just it's like, well, we fought a war not to have that, so we don't understand it. It's never existed here. Can't really find the whole list, but yeah, everyone who was popular at that time in 1893 was there.
Well, Walt Disney's father was a carpenter there, and thought
Yeah.
that maybe they got the inspiration for Disney World off the World's Fair, especially the City of Light.
Yeah, that very well could be. I mean, it was. Have you seen the weird still photos of it?
Yeah, I've seen.
Mhm.
Yeah, they had a few in the book and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, when you look at that and then think, oh, that was 1893, it's like, that's crazy that they could achieve that.
Yeah, and all within a year and a half,
Yeah,
and and that was a late start, and money was an issue, and strikes, and worker safety, and buildings just fall. Especially the manufacturer's building. That fucking building price should never went up. But just the fact that even during the drawing stage, that Burnham's looking at all these drawings and being like, no, this is way too fucking big. This is too much for the soil. This is too much to get accomplished. And they still did it all anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
they did a couple quick fixes as far as like the outside of the buildings with like their stucco type thing they did to make it look like old school, like stone and granite.
Well, what was the one innovation the guy came up with to so they didn't have to dig down in the bedrock to build this?
The
was like floating
grill works,
trusses
like,
or
of
something
steel
like-
and stuff like that. Basically,
Yeah.
rebar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was basically the floating base, which just you just interwove, basically made a lattice, and then when you put weight on it, it would stay. A lot of buildings in Chicago are still built under that principle. So
Because wasn't there something weird where like they'd build like the to like try to account for something, they'd build like a sidewalk next to the thing, and but like the whole building would be like 5 feet above the sidewalk, and then like settle into the sidewalk at some point.
Yeah, that's how they used to do it. Yeah.
that was called the what was that called, the drop retain? I don't know. Yeah, that was. Yeah, we just let it. It'll settle.
Which God knows the kind of math you need to do to figure out where the sidewalk goes when you build the building, but you know.
I still like it, like when they were talking about Burnham and Root and some of their famous buildings in Chicago that people wanted them to build, and how they had to make accommodations for all the dynamos in the basement. I was like, what? Oh, yeah, they didn't have electricity on a city grid. You had power dynamos in your basement that powered your building, and then you look up some of the not all the buildings had a standard either, depending on what was being used, and it's like, oh, that's crazy. Yeah, dynamo, that used to be.
Yeah, because they had lamp lighters. You had people go around lighting the lamps of the city to light the city.
Yep.
It's lit by gaslight.
And the way they talked about Chicago too before the World's Fair, where it was just a city of basically just trash, rats, and crap everywhere.
Well, they were building skyscrapers, but yeah, there's also this seedy underbelly of Chicago. Bunch of fucking Midwesterners who think they're hot.
Well, yeah, and then Chicago was actually a lot of people from Eastern Europe too, working in the slaughterhouses. Because remember that book, the famous book, The Jungle, comes from this time period about what the slaughterhouses in Chicago were like, and because basically all the livestock from the surrounding 4 states was sent there for rendering and processing, and that makes for a wonderful smell.
I think one of the, I think it's Burnham or some other guy. One of his works is like still around, but it was just like an entrance to like a cattle stock field or whatever.
It was
Yeah.
where the railway came.
Yeah, and it's just like these kind of like 3 arches on top of each other that's still there in Chicago, but like that's the only thing that survives of that whole place.
Yeah. What is it? The Chicago River still occasionally bubbles in parts of it, like Alka-Seltzer. Like somebody threw a giant Alka-Seltzer tab in there. And the reason why is because there's pockets of rotting animals that were like buried over by the silt. And then when they dredge the river occasionally, or these silt pockets, these basically pockets of animal corpses are uncovered. They decompose rapidly because oxygen is introduced. And it's like, oh, what's that fizzy stuff? It's like, oh, that's just like 100-year-old cattle carcasses. Still goes on to this day.
Well, yeah, because they talked about even in the book a couple times where it's like, yeah, just like they see a rotting horse floating by the intake for the city's water supply or whatever. Or just like, yeah, just see all the horse corpses in the river. It's like, okay, fucking shit. Like,
Horse Corpse River, my favorite metal band.
Well, the way they talked about it when they talked about the whole armed revolution where they tried to get it was in Michigan, they had a creek or whatever they were going to. I can't remember the town's name now. But they sent a bunch of people in the night to try and get a secret tap line into there because they wanted a clean water source because they were worried about the disease outbreak. Because talked about all that, and then they went there, and then they even had a cannon from the town they pointed at the train, and they said they'd kill them all before they gave them any water. And they just went like a few miles further down south and just found a town willing to give over the rights and stuff like that for clean water, as well as the new filtration system they put in. And it was like they kind of touched on some people being, getting sick and dying during that time from disease. but I don't know what the real numbers were from like people drinking that water on a daily basis. How often they got fucking sick and shit and died or were horribly ill all the time.
Oh, cholera was a big problem in this country till like the 19. When did they cholera? I think it was in the 50s. You quit hearing about it. But yeah, drinking water contaminated by sewage that was a very common problem everywhere in the world. So yeah, that wasn't it wasn't uncommon. But yeah, this is a great book if you want a lot of facts about something you've never heard of and probably should have heard of. Because they haven't. I think the last World's Fair was what, in the 50s?
Yeah.
No idea.
That was like
I know they quit doing them.
That was the 50s or 60s in New York.
Yeah,
Was the last one.
they kind of quit doing them because it was just. It's getting to be like the Olympics, like. a lot of
Build all
cities-
this infrastructure that'll just dilapidate after a year.
Well, it ends up costing you more money than you make.
Yeah.
Got the internet.
Oh yeah, question now. But do you guys remember some of the attractions they had deemed were safer and more interesting? Not more interesting. They didn't approve any of them, but the ones they thought the public would be better with than the Ferris wheel.
I like they wanted electric boats. It's
Yeah.
like I don't want those fucking loud engines. I want boats powered by electricity and water. Did they do that? I can't remember if
No,
they
did. They chose the electric
they did
launches.
that.
They had a
Was
few-
I can't remember. Was there fiascos that happened with that or not?
No, it was just the landscape architect was really pissy about it because he didn't want to ruin his vision of the island that became also the Japanese exhibit.
Yeah.
Because that island's still there today, and that's a central piece of that park. But he really wanted the electric launches because he didn't want the noise coming off them to disrupt
Yeah.
people's
Well, I
pleasure.
can't remember if there's any fiascos where like a bunch of people were electrocuted trying to like make an
No,
electric
it was just
boat.
more of a. They wanted the more practical of like, oh, a bunch of people could be transported around with tugboats.
Okay.
But then it was like, oh, that's noisy and unsightly. It doesn't look as pretty. So that was more or less the main reason.
So it also seems like a time where like people don't know what electricity is, and it seemed like it'd be really easy to just be accidentally killed by electricity, because it's still really easy to be accidentally killed by electricity. So I just can't.
Oh yeah,
imagine.
because like every time they did a work update, like late midway and later on in the book when construction was actually underway, they're like 3 people died, 2 electrocutions, 1 guy like fell from a height and killed himself. It was always at least 1 electrocution every time they talked about the
Yeah.
death toll. So I mean, especially since this was the first widespread AC, usage of like a whole grid, and same thing with all the street lights and everything else. I thought it was kind of weird, especially when they talked about the Kodak licenses you needed. Like if you wanted to take photographs at the fair, you needed to buy a license depending on your camera
Yeah.
size. And I was like, that is really random. Why did they even think about that? Let alone, I know they said this because they wanted to control the images coming out from the fair. They
Yeah.
wanted to be positive, that way people across the country wouldn't get a bad impression from one bad picture. But at the same time, it was like, it's not like it's social media where it just spreads everywhere in 5 seconds. You have like one tintype you make a photograph out of, and you have to develop properly, otherwise it goes to shit. So because he probably only made like what, 1 print out of that, or how hard was it to print like multiple copies of that at that time? I guess, and how
No.
costly, because that was the other question. But it was like, I don't know why that. I mean, it sounded like they made money off of it, but at the same time, yeah. But the things I was kind of more surprised of, like the rides they thought were safer, like the whole, let's put a huge slide with a toboggan on it, like 5 stories in the air, and then just put poles, because this is their way to get visitors home to connecting cities, where they would just, the toboggan company wanted to build this, where they just had depots at certain major cities, even going to New York, and they just have a gradual decline down with just a slide in the air with no safety rails or belts or anything, and people just like stories in the air, like just sliding down a giant slide on a toboggan going back to a city. And it was like, why is that safer than a Ferris wheel? Like, just imagine like a shit ton of people falling to their deaths going because of just the wind and everything else associated with that.
Did we touch on about like wasn't the reason they got the Ferris wheels because they wanted is because they thought the Eiffel Tower was a blight on America that they didn't build it first?
Well, they thought it was it was their place more than France to have that, but they thought building another tower would just basically be them copying somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the reason they didn't do Ferris's thing to begin with is because one, they didn't think it was a good idea, and two, they didn't want to back him with the money, because they originally agreed to it, and then the next day they like, no, that's too much money, we're not gonna do it, and then it stalled them for like a couple months because they were unsure about it. But they thought a better idea also was basically putting a giant trolley car on a bunch of bungee straps and throwing it off a cliff, then reloading it and putting it back up with the crane and keep doing that. And then they said the cab had no harnesses or seat belts of any kind.
Just
for the-
thrown around in this thing.
How many grandmas can we put in this thing?
Well, I like the stories about the people. There were some people that did freak out even on the Ferris wheel.
Yeah.
Like that lady had to put that her dress over the guy's head to calm him down like a horse. She put blinders on it.
Yeah.
He was trying to fight his way out of the top of the Ferris wheel.
Yeah, because even though they put metal grates over everything to make sure no one killed themselves, he still almost broke through the door and killed
Well, then
himself.
when they first got the Ferris wheel going, when they could generate enough steam pressure to turn it,
Yeah.
how the workmen just grabbed the hold of it anywhere just to hang on and ride the superstructure because they thought it was cool. It's like, oh, these people just didn't have any sense of danger. It's like, yeah, jump on this thing.
Well, I mean,
Boredom is a delirious drug.
I mean, if I could die just from drinking a glass of water, I'd probably be less
More
into
adventurous.
Yeah.
That is hanging off a Ferris wheel's nothing. Have you tried drinking water lately?
Try drinking corpse water from the Chicago River.
But
I like
no.
how one of the architect firms, it wasn't Barnum and Root, but it was one of the other ones they talked about, how one of the people they fired was Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah, because he was doing houses on the side. and
Yeah,
did
he's doing
stuff.
stuff on the clock, and they're like, "You're fired. You're a terrible architect." Called that one wrong.
I think it was actually the guy, because you remember after Root died, he went to New York to interview this guy for like a part of the partnership in his firm, and
Yeah.
the guy was like on fucking it wasn't morphine, it was something else. It was
Like
Ether or something?
like ether.
laudanum.
Yeah, ether or laudanum, one of those drugs back in that day, and he seemed just really weird and like off the wall, and he was like he took it as a good sign because he thought the guy was good.
This guy's eccentric and creative. Now he's just stoned.
But then he followed him back to Chicago, and that's why he got the job. But then he ended up firing him because of his work ethic, because he kept falling asleep at his desk because he was high. And
Yeah.
so then he started a firm in New York, and I think that was the guy that hired Frank Lloyd Wright and called him lazy and stupid
Oh.
and shit. And it was like, oh, that's nice. A drug addict on, I think it was either, fuck, what was it? It wasn't laudanum. It was one of the, it was a Chinese drug, like the opium part.
Yum?
It was opium.
Oh, okay. That's a fun one. Smoke it through a clay pipe.
What was it, that Root that like married a lady that was just like on her deathbed essentially?
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
dying of cholera.
Yeah, and he said he wanted to marry her before, and everyone was like, "Well, we'd understand if you don't want to marry her." He's like, "No, that's horrible. I said I'd marry her," and he did. And she they had to wheel her into the ceremony because she couldn't stand.
And they said she looked like death warmed over in her wedding dress. So, you know, I mean, I applaud him, I guess, for doing that, because it was nice at least to see that he kept his word. He didn't make her feel like shit in her last couple, weeks of her life. But at the same
I wonder if he
time-
put a life insurance policy on it.
I
It
don't
seems
know if
to
he
be
was
a
that-
common theme in this book. You can just insure anyone and shove them into an oven, and then you're rich.
Oh yeah, it was amazing.
My
how
third carpenter died. It's weird. I need to cash this policy in now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I felt bad for the one guy that was married, and then his wife's sister and their child came along with him in Chicago and worked for him and lived with him for a while. Where he was just like, yeah, I kept noticing they kept laughing together and spending a lot of time together, and everybody was telling me they were having sex behind my back, but that's just poor shit.
That's just angry talk.
She only just hates me and doesn't want to spend time with me or touch me at all. But yeah,
God wouldn't do that to me.
and then he just abandons his daughter and his ex-wife there and just never checks on him again, and they all die because of it. So it's like, yeah, good job, guy. And then you warn the next girl, and she dies anyway too. So woohoo!
And then there was the weird story too. We completely didn't talk about the Pendergast guy, the guy from
Yeah.
Ireland, who murdered Mayor Harrison.
Mhm.
That was like towards the end of the book. Because remember, this guy was crazy, and he thought because he worked on Harrison's campaign that he was owed some huge job.
Yeah,
And then he walked up to his house to see him, like you could see the mayor back then,
yeah.
anyone, and he just finally got to see him after a while, and he just shot him.
Yeah, and his son likened it to like a book falling down on the floor downstairs.
Yeah.
That's why he didn't check on his dad right away.
Well, and then he was arguing with his friend because the Harrison was still alive for a little bit, and he's like, "I'm dead. He shot me in the heart." And his friend was like, "Nah, it just went into your abdomen. It's not bleeding enough for a heart." And he's like, "No, God damn it, he shot me in the heart." It's like, "I'm telling you, it didn't hit your heart. It just hit you in the chest." And then he died. But everyone around him was like, "Yeah, he died arguing and angry." How he lived. It's like, "I'm telling you, he shot me in the heart." I was right. But yeah.
And H.H. Holmes and the story about Pendergast actually reminds me of. Does anybody know about the assassin that killed Grover Cleveland?
No.
History with that guy. It actually pretty much mirrors Pendergast and like H.H. Holmes' story, because he's basically a professional grifter that just tried to like con people out of money and make up shit to con people. But he was a member of a cult that believed in basically not having, it was selective breeding. You couldn't get married unless you were approved of. You couldn't breed unless you were approved of. And it was all about having sex with women, but men couldn't come. Only the women could come.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. That would lead to a lifetime of frustration and anger.
And so he got kicked out after 3 years because everybody hated him so much because he was such a downer that
Did he
thought,
come on out too?
Yeah, that he basically got kicked out and got disowned. So he kept moving from city to city on the East Coast. He kept backing Republican people, and there was two factions of Republicans at the time, and he backed the side that had Grover Cleveland on it. And then the first time he lost, and then the second time he backed him again. This time he won, and so, but his whole backing was that he stood up and I think he stood up once in Boston and stood up once in Philadelphia in a town square to talk to people about Grover Cleveland, and that's all he did besides write a letter to a newspaper that nobody could comprehend, just like the guy's postcards they talked about to the one rich guy that he wrote to, that he was like, yeah, I kept these because they were really fucking weird and I couldn't make any sense of them. And so that was the same type of letter. And then, so he thought he was going to get a cabinet appointment because he said he actually, when he moved to Washington, D.C., when Grover Cleveland became president after that, he stalked him and his Secretary of State and his Vice President and kept asking him when he was getting made ambassador of Paris or ambassador of this or that and the other thing. And they first laughed in his face, and then afterwards they told him, get the fuck out of there. And then eventually he was like, well, no, they won't listen to me, so I'm going to buy a gun or a pearl handle revolver because that will look better in a museum when I kill the president. And then he shoots him twice in the back and then runs off and gets caught and then confesses his crimes to whoever will hear it. And then, like, nobody remembers him in history at all because no one cares about the guy that killed Grover Cleveland. And
Yeah,
the
we're kind of
Well,
removed
well,
from that.
nobody cares who Grover Cleveland was.
oh yeah, but at the same time it was kind of weird because I guess at his execution he was hanged, but he wanted an orchestra to play the whole time. Where he wrote a poem the night before, and he wanted a full orchestra to play where I read the poem and while he was hanged, and they denied him, and he hated them for it. It's like why do people need to hear an orchestra while you're hanged?
Although Holmes had a lot of weird thing where it's like when he was finally executed, like all the people that were there had like really weird, strange luck.
Well, yeah, the warden hanged himself because he couldn't live with the fact he killed his friend, basically, which is fucking weird.
Yeah.
It's like if you knew, even if the guy was nice or whatever the whole time, like he still killed hundreds of people.
And then like he didn't get like exhumed several times, and like they eventually like put him in concrete underground.
He paid before he was executed to be entombed in concrete within concrete within a steel casket filled with concrete, so nobody could exhume him.
Okay.
So, because he was worried that somebody would do this, because that's what he was worried about the most.
Oh, because he did that shit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So he's never been exhumed or exhumed to this day. So, because people, they tried to pay his family for the rights to it, but they refused. So. But no, like the whole, I really applaud like the last part of the book too, where like the detective like slowly pieces out like where the kids are buried and like what happened to everybody that like took the ride away from Chicago with them and stuff like that. Because how hard that must have been. Because nowadays with like, oh yeah, to see where his cell phone was tagged at or what his browser history was or where his credit card was swiped at. But it's like, oh, I just gotta go to every fucking house in Cleveland and ask about this fucking
Questions.
guy. Yeah,
It wasn't there like this is like the infancy of like fingerprinting and stuff like that was around this time. Like maybe not fingerprinting itself, but like the idea that like somebody. I mean, at some point they introduced the idea that like there's something individual to a person that you can track or whatever. I'm not sure if it's exactly fingerprinting or if it was other shit. But...
I think it was fingerprinting because I think they talked about it a little bit with that. Remember in the gassing chamber, there's that footprint that's still there to this day or whatever that the woman, one of his first victims in Chicago, put on there.
Yeah.
That it won't go away and they can't figure out why it's still there and why it stayed there this whole time. Which is kind of creepy and cool at the same time.
Yeah. Sort of unsettling, but you know. Yeah. So anyway, Devil in the White City. Check it out.
It was supposed to be made into a movie with like Leonardo DiCaprio, but now it's like a TV series on Hulu or some shit.
Yeah.
Well, it's not out yet, but it's.
I mean, it's still everybody that was rumored to be in it's still in it, so I don't know.
Oh, it's still Leonardo DiCaprio. Okay.
And Martin Scorsese.
Okay.
Supposedly.
Yep. So it'll be on Hulu. So some of us will see that.
I will. I have Hulu.
I don't have Hulu.
I can get you some stuff.
Talk after the show.
Don't let the internet know we're sharing.
Secret.
I mean, they gotta know, because, I mean, shit, when Netflix doesn't publish their viewer numbers and they're like, wait a minute, we only have 300 million subscribers, how are 600 million people watching this? Like,
Well, even this, sometimes I think I just like cleaned a lot of stuff out of my like browser stuff. I just like got rid of all that crap because it was taking up a bunch of space and all the secrets. No, and so I went to go sign in at Netflix, and then like I signed in, but I have to like fuck, what's that password? And then I go to sign in, and I get an email. It's like, you signed in at Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Did you mean to do that? Yeah. You mean I'm not in? You know, I'm not in Michigan anymore.
I move around a lot.
my business takes me frequently from Cedar Rapids to Michigan. Don't ask why.
I was I was in the military. Yeah, I'd have sign-ins from like all over the place. So yeah, they probably they know.
This is how you get connected to the Michigan militia.
Michigan militia.
Michigan.
It's strange out here.
Oh yeah, I haven't asked for your update about, because I saw in the news this week that Indianapolis legalized pot, so I wanted to check out an update on how Michigan is handling legalizing pot.
Everyone is stoned. I mean, when they legalized pot here, they just kind of legitimized what had been going on already, so it wasn't like a big step. There wasn't like people suddenly like, pot, I've got to go try it. No, it was kind of a...
Well, I didn't think it was the Popeyes chicken sandwich, but...
yeah, no, it wasn't as big as that. I mean, it's okay. It's weird. I don't know where you buy it, because you can't buy it at dispensaries. That's only for people that have medical cards. But you can stand up,
really cool doctors.
or you can stand outside and have people go in with cards and buy it for you. That's legal, because they just come out and give it to you, and it's not illegal for you to have it. But
There's no...
I don't know. I haven't really followed up on it. I mean, until my work backs off on
testing.
Their drug testing policy, I'll never know. So, plus, I don't even drink anymore. I'm kind of becoming a lame old person. So,
I just huff model glue. That's my existence now.
Yeah, how many models will this this weed brownie buy? It's like, I'll get the model instead.
I can get hours, days, weeks of entertainment out of this, or I can feel really weird and lose track of time for like 2 hours and just be kind of disappointed later.
Yeah, I sympathize more with Comlin's side of the argument too, where it's like, $60 for a couple hours of whatever the fuck this is gonna be, or I can buy a video game and have like 60 hours entertainment.
Why not have both?
Plus, I can't sell the pot brownie later after I eat it for 20 bucks back. So
I mean, yeah, it's okay here. I haven't heard about any. I know lots of people that grow it.
Well, I guess I didn't. Plus, it was also like a side effect of me asking, or intentionally me asking too about like, well, have you seen an improvement in road construction or schools being funded better, or anything that would actually contribute from taxes that we usually not.
No, we haven't seen. I don't know if this is gonna go to fruition because right now, because we have a Republican-controlled. I think we're unicameral here. I think we just have like a house. Versus the governor, who's a Democrat, and she wanted to like increase like 50 cents a gallon increase in gas taxes, and everyone's like, no. So now they're looking for like they're thinking about like a lot of their roads are going to go back to being unpaved. And so there's all these big holes in our budget because the fucking auto companies and all the industry here now they don't pay any taxes at all. So yeah, we got these gaping holes in our budget they're trying to fill by fleecing people that make about 20% less money than they did 10 years ago. It's like, yeah, I don't think we're heading towards paradise here.
And why don't the automotive companies pay taxes? That's something more recent.
Oh,
or
as
something
part of the
new?
financial thing in 2008, they got deals. It's like, well, if you want us to keep our plants open, we have to get the same deal Toyota gets in Toadsuck, Alabama. It's like, well, Toadsuck, Alabama is not supporting this massive infrastructure either. And, well, we're going to have to close up shop then.
Well, it's like, yeah, all the car companies, like GM has like a huge, like, fucking skyscraper in downtown Detroit. And it's like, it's all nice looking, but like the reason they were able to build it there, it's like never paid a lifetime of no taxes to build that headquarters there
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, the Renaissance Center's looks like, some kind of futuristic building, and no one's paid a dime of taxes except the people that live there.
Plus, my question is, I mean, yes, I know that's a reality of any business at any point, especially when it comes down to their being stubborn about the money and the taxes they pay. If they're willing to, they'll take the huge hit and discontinue production, find another facility, build it, rent it, whatever, go to a different country, state, township, what have you. But at the same time, you already have an established workforce and training base where you're already at and a lifetime heritage there. So that people know what you do and they work there for it. Whereas not
Well,
everybody...
the people that would understand that wouldn't don't do those things.
No, I know that.
You
but
give
I'm
a
just
business
saying...
major, it's like, oh, look at this, we can just move this over here.
No, I know, but it's like you can't just move a whole fucking car industry, especially a whole
Yeah, tell that to a
company.
business major.
Yeah. I mean,
Tell that to a lawyer.
I mean, because there's so many car companies now in either Indiana, Alabama, Mississippi, and I think isn't there a plant in Louisiana now, or is it just Alabama,
Yeah.
Mississippi?
Several.
Okay.
Prius
So,
made there.
I mean, there's only so many people that live around there, only so many people that have that certain skill set. It's going to take so many years to train up that workforce and get your production level back. Not that it can't be done, but do you have the profit
An entire workforce that has no union, so it's like a constantly rotating base of different workers you're constantly training.
Well, yeah, that too. But I mean,
I heard when Kia started built, what shithole did they go to? But they went to when it came to training, they went to visual cards, like not printed things. Their workforce was so bad down there, they just trained them with basically comic books with pictures. I'm not making that shit up. But they weren't. I mean, a $15 an hour. I forget where that was, but like a $15 an hour job down there, that's a great fucking job. It's like you're the king of the hill over down there if you got that kind of money. But yeah, they don't care. They'd make it all in China and India if they could get away with it. Yeah, I mean the biggest hurdle they have is convincing people to pay $60,000 for a truck made in India. It'd be like, no.
Well, I mean, the quality already has gone down in years just because of their outsourcing from getting parts from different countries they haven't done before. Their suppliers aren't 100% what they used to be. and so already consumers notice that, and that's why it seems like a lot of people do tend, especially now that a lot of the foreign makers have a presence in America and actually not paying the tariffs to get into the country. But it seems like Americans are leaning more towards foreign brands now than they are domestic in some cases. Not really with the trucks bracket, but with the SUVs, crossovers.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
and
cars it's all foreign stuff,
Cars.
but trucks it's all American stuff, and
Yeah.
SUVs.
I know trucks and SUVs is where the real money's at, so who cares about cars? But at the same time, at some point, wouldn't you think like Ford or GM?
I don't know, things. I mean, with self-driving cars, shit's gonna get really weird in the next 30 years. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, Ford, the big three already have a plan for self-driving cars and battery cars, and that plan is called China. None of that's, we gave that stuff away. We're like, you want to make self-driving cars and battery shit? You know how lethal it is to work around those batteries all day, every day. You go ahead and do that shit in China. 'Cause you're not going to find people signing on to do that here, because everyone gets cancer after 5 years. You know, I mean, even at Tesla, I think the stuff's pre-packed before it's put together in California. I don't think I think they just kind of merge the batteries and the body into one thing at the final assembly point at the old NUMMI plant there. I don't think that they're. So yeah, that crap. The cars, and those are cars for poor people. Essentially, that's the future of that market. Is just a bunch of livery companies owning self-driving cars and people maintaining them.
Well, and, like I heard this future basically it's just gonna be fleets of self-driving cars, and like you don't own a car, you just kind of like lease it for a moment, like you have a timeshare on a car. It's like the car pulls up, it's like, oh good, I have the car for this evening, and like you throw your groceries in, hop in the back seat, and start playing video games.
See, I would fucking hate that because then I'd be like, well, I can't run to the store. at the
Yeah,
last
but we'd
second.
just be old people then. It'd be all the kids like, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what I said earlier. I think on the last show, I even said about like this girl from Sweden that talked at the UN a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Greta.
Gave this screeching speech about whatever. It's like this is what we've done to the youth in Western civilization. We've so disenfranchised them because we've fucked them out of any money they could make. We've told them, well, you got to go to college and get a degree, and then when you get out, it's like, well, you owe us $100,000, and the highest paying job you can get is $9 with that degree. We've completely disenfranchised these younger people to the point where it's like, yeah, they'll run and grab a hold of shit like that because they don't see any future in this system because there isn't the way it's working now. So they'll run to communism and environmentalism and every other stupid thing because they hate the system now because they know it's not going to do anything for them. I mean, subconsciously, I think that's going on. They have reasons why they say they're doing these things that they're doing, but I think the real reason is they're completely disenfranchised. Like, they don't care if people can have nice cars and big houses anymore. They'll say that's all bad because they know they're never going to have those things. So fuck it. why should they? And that's what we've done. And that's the same.
Like, yeah, there's I'm not sure if it's a real article. It's something I saw on Reddit, so fuck it. It said like boomers are having trouble selling their dream houses.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
And then like the bottom is like they should try. At the bottom it says they should try drinking less coffee and pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and starting at a low wage job just to get some experience.
Yeah, they should sell their house to get experience in selling their house too, because they don't know what they're talking about and shit like that. It's like, yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's some real uncomfortable shit when you look into this cross-generational hate that's like all the rage. Because especially like the baby boomers are just square in the bullseye of that. And some of the stuff I've heard and read is like, oh wow, that's like some deep hate there. It's like they squandered the best economy in history and they left us with shit. And they all bought Harley Davidsons and retired to Florida. You know, we should go kill them. It's like, you're talking about your grandparents. You're going to go kill your grandparents? You might even have some points. But, however, this whole murder sideline here, we got to get away from that.
Yeah, it's been because like the new generation's Gen Z, that's after millennials or however marketing wants to spin it. So they've been calling it boomers versus zoomers, but now the new one is boomers versus doomers. like the new next generation kids, just like it's all
People
doom.
that'll be alive during Doomsday. People that are.
Yeah. There's you know,
Well,
but
it's
that
just,
that has been done to kids. I think that's why we see all this weird stuff on the college campuses and this weird counterculture. It's like, yeah, everything out here is not for them. There is no way they can buy into it. Oh, they could inherit it maybe, but that's not going to be most of them, because most people that like baby boomers, and they're giving all their money away to fucking doctors and insurance companies so they can be kept alive. So there's going to be nothing left for these kids in the future, and they know it, and this is how they're reacting to it.
well,
you know,
I can't blame people for wanting to. I mean, fuck the system up and change it more into somebody else's favor because, like you
Oh
said,
no, I don't blame them either. It's just the things they're grasping onto is doom. Like, you will end your civilization, because everyone who's against that is staunchly against it, and they're not all old people either.
Okay,
And-
so I mean, okay, so let's pick one. Environmentalism.
Yeah.
The way I heard somebody put it succinctly this week is what I entirely agree with. If everybody's wrong about global warming and about environmentalism as a whole, what's the harm of doing it? Because then you'll have sustainable energy, clean life practices, and a better economy to go home to at the end of the day, because you're not burning resources a finite number of, you're not ruining the environment for future generations, and you're advancing technology across the board and creating new jobs. So what's the loss from moving away from fossil fuels and harmful chemicals?
Because you don't have anything to really replace it that's viable. You don't have an energy science. It's all these windmills and shit. That's what you call low load energy. That doesn't produce the power that like natural gas and nuclear power plants produce. That doesn't produce a strong base load for your grid. You've always got to have, because Japan wanted to go away from nuclear power after the Fukushima thing,
Yeah.
and they quickly looked into it and they're like, oh, wait a minute, we can't generate a strong backbone for our electrical grid if we do that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Most people with the green energy projections actually include and actually amp up building nuclear power plants. They don't get rid of them.
I don't hear that around here. I mean, the bottom line is you don't have the technology yet. I mean, everyone wants that Star Trek future. It's just not here. If you do all that green shit, what you're going to do is cripple your economy, going to destroy your society, and you'll end up having the the Chinese and the Indians will just pull ahead because they don't give a fuck.
Isn't Lockheed like 7 years away from bringing out their fission reactor or fusion reactor?
Oh, they already have it in some. It's running in some abstract sense,
Okay.
but it's highly processed. What is it? It's helium-3 and some kind of hydrogen. It basically takes more energy to make the components that will fuse in it than it could actually make. I mean, again, you got to make it scalable, so that's what they're working towards. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is you can't destroy your economy making all these stupid demands. And also, the people that are going to fight against you are going to fight ferociously against you.
No, I mean, I wouldn't expect any less of the fossil fuel industry, one of the biggest industries in the U.S. economy, or any economy for that matter.
Well, I'm just talking like people in cities. Like,
Oh.
tell people you can't run your air conditioner, or you know, stuff like that. Like, oh, you're just going to get thrown out of office unless you're planning on not being able to have the rest of us vote again. Which some of these people kind of, if you really follow their logic, it's like you use language like "we will force people and they will see the way." It's like, oh, okay, this is kind of what.
You're gonna take my guns and make me turn on my air conditioner? Fuck you, boogaloo!
This is what Marx was. This is Marx's language about, you know, the dictatorship of the proletariat. Yeah. But that's the disenfranchisement of young people. That's what you get. Bunch of fucking hippies running around.
Their goddamn avocado toast and their
Yep.
$20 lattes.
Have you seen the avocado ice cream yet?
Oh God, why?
I don't know. It's out there. I am curious to try it because, like, I can imagine like avocado is a very kind of neutral taste that if you just add enough shit to it, it probably tastes like ice
Well,
cream.
you add enough sugar to anything, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's
But you just immediately look at that. It's like, why? But like, it's got to work for somebody. It's like, why are we putting avocados in ice cream? Jesus Christ!
well.
And
Then,
it's expensive too.
well, then you might as well like top it with all the stuff avocado goes well with, like an egg and bacon. on top of fucking avocado.
I haven't had avocado toast yet. I hear good things about that.
Well, it's just the yeah. The
It's just toast,
and
but spreaded avocado on it, right?
yeah, with like
That's
an
it.
egg and shit. Too.
Yeah.
So it's like all the fats would work together. So I think that would actually be good. But the ice cream. Oh, because that one movie I was talking about on Netflix I was watching tonight, the newer one with the timer.
Yeah,
time
the
travel
Steakland
shit.
guys movie.
The girl, his little girl, likes to make him ice cream pancakes. So she makes pancakes and tops it with ice cream. That's their breakfast. They drizzle maple syrup all over it. And it was like, that's fucking horrible, but also, maybe. like, that's kind of my thought about avocado ice cream. That sounds horrible, but maybe.
There's probably the last thing. We're on YouTube. There's a new. Well, it's not new. It's been around for a while, but I've heard a bunch of people on podcasts talk about it's Bon Appetit. It's basically just like a bunch of different cooking shows. There's I think if you ever heard like people talk about America's Test Kitchen, like this is America's Test Kitchen.
Oh, okay.
And specifically, it's called Gourmet Makes, and it's this lady named Claire. She's very pleasant, but she's she's very good at her job. But she's forced in this show. She's forced to like reverse engineer basically like industrial food, like Hot Pockets and like Pop-Tarts and shit like that, and try to make a gourmet version of it.
That people would never want, like, make Spam at home.
And so I watched the Hot Pocket episode, and like, man, it's fascinating to watch her she made like this dough, and then she like put it away like in the refrigerator, and then she like made this sheet of like garlic and butter, and the next day she like chilled that too, and she came out and she just like put the sheet on top of the dough and just started folding it until she like folded all the butter and garlic into the dough, and that became like the base for the Hot Pocket she made. And like, she made different versions of the Hot Pockets, like using different doughs and different kind of construction and stuff like that. And every time people looked at it, like, that looks great. And every time I looked at it, I was like, that doesn't look great, but I'd definitely fucking eat that.
Did you see there, because I know you made fried chicken recently, did you see there, they have a video where it's not her, but it's a guy that makes Nashville like hot chicken sandwiches.
Yeah.
And so he like double fries with like crystal hot sauce and stuff like that. This
Huh.
chicken. And it's really good, or looks really good. I wanted to try it, but I don't know where crystal hot sauce is around here. I thought Walmart might have had it, but I didn't. I forgot to look for it last time.
Is it the one that has like kind of a white label and just like a little
blue,
taper?
like anchor.
Yeah, they sell
blue.
that at Hy-Vee.
Okay.
I got a bottle upstairs.
Okay. So I was actually gonna try and make that soon. Cause
It's
like,
really fucking cheap.
Oh.
Yeah. It's like 88 cents a bottle or some shit like that. It was the cheapest hot sauce there. That's why I got it. Oh yeah, there's something like she made the Pop-Tarts. It's like, that looked pretty fucking good, and then she like described the unit cost, and it was like $35 a hot Pop-Tart. I was like, well, fuck that.
Well, because I mean, she probably made like actual pastry dough and.
Yeah.
All this
She's
icing.
like a master like pastry chef. So yeah, I like her stuff. And there's also another guy on there, Brad. And whenever Brad and Claire are together on a show, it's just fun because like Claire, she's very like deliberate and like overthinks everything and like worried.
Yeah.
And Brad's just basically like this New Jersey bumpkin. Like he's like if you like combine a loud New Jersey construction worker with like like a hick, and like that's Brad.
And he's a chef as well.
Yes, he's a chef as well. He has like a really cool like meat cleaver knife that he uses that like he like made himself or some shit. Because he's like he used to have a lot of odd jobs, but he knows a lot about like knives and steel and shit like that. So like he's always the guy to go to about knife. Because I had one episode I watched where it's like everybody picks out their favorite knife, and so that's an interesting episode because then you get a look at like all the different people who are on the show or the different various YouTube channels of Bon Appetit because they have like 500 different TV shows on there.
Oh, okay.
But then they had every chef that's kind of like frequents the channel, like shows off their favorite knife, and so that's a pretty interesting episode.
Ever seen that History Channel show where it's about the butchers
No.
and they have to see who can do the best with like butchering a whole cow or something? They all have interesting tools. Like sometimes the show provides them because you need very specific knives for that, but they always have their like their own favorite butcher knife.
Yeah.
Some of these things look like something like a Viking would carry. In the mouth. Like you gotta split the hip bone with this. But these people, what's dangerous about these shows is the show in particular where you really appreciate how butchers work is like, oh, they got their hands in there and they're going like this with something that could cut through a fucking leg bone of a cow. They're not cutting themselves. A few guys cut themselves, but usually it's not part of the show. It's just like who gets the best quality cuts of meat, and these people judge like how good a butcher are you. And they have people that went to culinary schools, and then they got like the crazy 90-pound woman from Kentucky. I'm self-taught, and she was actually really good. But she was like a self-taught butcher. It's like, that's an interesting, like, I'm just going to go with that. It's like, today I'm going to be a butcher. And, but yeah, some of them, like, it's all custom made. Like, some of these guys are butchers for famous restaurants in New York, and they have, like, custom made knives, and, like, they just unspool a set in this thing, and, you know.
I mean, that's to talk. I think it's even in, like, the Chef movie, where, like, they go to like a cutlery store that like chefs shop at, because like the shit you get at like any store, any like Walmart or Target, anything like that, it's all garbage.
Yeah.
But it's like you got to go to these specialty shops where you're spending at least $120 on a knife, and that's like that's the low end one. But like that'll do you good enough. You should really go buy the $500 one. But
I have a $500. You've used it because I've had it for like 15 years. I just get it sharpened every 2 years. But yeah, that's that. Remember the one that's kind of curved and it's thick?
Yeah.
I'm using it. Well, we made something here. And I was like, yeah, use that knife, and because you could cut like raw bacon, like it was a razor blade. Like I got one of those. I still use it. Used it last week. But yeah.
But then you watch what other YouTube channels. There's like a dude in Japan where like he's really good at like using a grindstone, and like he like go to a thrift shop, buy like $1 knife, and then like turn it into like, holy shit, that looks awesome.
Yeah, I've seen his videos because it's like the cheap knife versus the $1,000 knife that you can get or whatever.
Yeah, those knives would get them so sharp, but you can. It looks like a sonic boom when he waves it, like the air particles. Kidding, that doesn't happen. That'd be a sharp fucking knife. Well, that's all I got.
All right.
For you're late. So, this week for the American Greed Factory podcast, this is Nathan.
This is Colin.
Andrew.
Goodbye, America.